right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Santa Barbara Harbor Commission regular meeting for May 18th, 2023. Angela, would you like to do a roll call, please?
Yes, please. Commissioner Anderson? Here. Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner McCray?
Here.
Commissioner Nelson? Here. Commissioner Stanowicz?
Here.
Chair Stedman?
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Stedman, no. Good to go tonight.
Excellent. Any general public comment?
I have not received any speaker slips for general public comment, and I don't have anyone with their hand raised online, but if anyone would like to speak, they can indicate that by clicking the raise hand icon, and I will call on them. And still not seeing any.
Very well, thank you. Vice Chair?
Great. Thank you, Chair Stedman. Yeah, we had a lot of subcommittees and work groups meet over the past few weeks, and I believe Commissioner Nelson would like to make a report on commercial fishing as well as the business activity permit.
Yes, both committees. I mean, one of the things about dissolving the standing committees is it makes it easier for us to get together if schedules permit, which is a real positive thing. And with the Business Activity Permit Committee, I think we're making real progress. At the conclusion of the last meeting, all were in attendance, and we think we've got a path that addresses public safety, congestion, and compensation, and which were the kind of the three goals that we had, and to make certain that what we recommend to the Harbor Commission can be implemented. I believe Caesar is working to get on the calendar of the city attorney's office to make sure what we have mapped out, in fact, is possible for implementation. And what I want to do is make a special point to say that one of the reasons why we are achieving any consensus at all is because of the attitude and the openness which Caesar has brought to our meetings. It's really great and comfortable to work with somebody who is not confrontational and really wants to collaborate. So I personally appreciate the role that you've played with the business activity permit. And I want to say the same thing about the commercial fisheries work group, even though we are on a subsequent item today. John and I had a series of exchanges with Jeanette Brzezinski and one meeting with her, and I think both of us learned more in that one meeting and those email exchanges than I've learned about slip policy allocation in the last 3.5 years. And the report that I did for the work group is as much a function of her openness and transparency as anything else. So we want to thank Jeanette. That's my report.
Yeah, I would just add it was very good to see the marina management software. You know, I can't believe we made it through COVID and a subcommittee and all those proceedings, you know, about slip assignment. And how long have you had that software, the marina management software? Is that all? 10 years? Okay. Well, it was good to see it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, guys. The next subcommittee was the cruise ship subcommittee, which met on Tuesday, and I believe Commissioner Anderson would like to speak on that.
Yeah, it was another well-attended meeting by the public, and now that Commissioner Hanrahan is no longer with us, as the first meeting that I led, and I think it went fairly well. It was open forum and discussion. The staff presented proposed changes. They've done a really thoughtful job, I think, incorporating what the public has said, and you know, the main concern is environment, the air and water specifically, and then also taking into account the business side of things. As a really thoughtful presentation and suggestions. Come June, I think we'll have hopefully a more full report back to the commission here, kind of detailing out the way we think it should go and get your guys' feedback in June.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Anybody like to? Oh, yep, Commissioner McCray.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. I have thought a lot about how Santa Barbara works with the rest of the state and the people in the state. And I just want to say that, we really appreciate one of the nicest outdoor environments in the state. And part of that has to do with the fact that we don't have a giant power plant sitting on our coastline the way most of the rest of the counties in the state actually do. The county to the north of us does. San Luis, Ventura has a couple. We don't have that. Instead, other communities actually provide us with power, and then those other communities also provide us with fuels for our vehicles. They provide us with materials for building and construction here in Santa Barbara. They provide us with means to do the agriculture, which is a big part of Santa Barbara County. One of the benefits of having that is that we here in Santa Barbara do have a wonderful environment that everybody really wants to come and visit. And I feel that we kind of owe it to the people of the rest of the state to open our arms to their coming to visit. And that's really no matter how they manage to get here, whether it's by flying or by train, it's kind of a fun thing to do, by driving here, and also by the cruise ships. These are people who, they bear the environmental costs and they take the environmental risks that are involved in providing us those things which keep our lives here nice. And I think that really needs to be thought about carefully before we have any knee-jerk responses with respect to cruise ships beyond doing what we do quite well in this county, which is to try to minimize the negative environmental impacts of the things that go on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McCray. Would any of the other commissioners like to speak on behalf of any of the work groups or subcommittees? Okay, I think we're all set. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Thank you.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes from the regular meeting of April 20th, 2023.
I'll make a motion for approval of the minutes.
Second?
Yes.
Can I make a correction? I believe after the commercial fisherman presentation that we had at the last meeting, I think I made a motion, and I forget who seconded it, to support their efforts, and I didn't see that reflected.
Commissioner Cohen, we can check back on that and include it. If you guys wanted to, you could still pass it, or we can save it till the next meeting. But if you wanted to make that correction, we can not make that correction and still pass the minutes if you like.
Sure, I'd like to move that we approve the minutes, adding that correction.
Absolutely.
Very well. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Yes.
That's unanimous.
All right. Let's move on to new business. Angela, could you read item number 2, please?
Item number 2, proposed lease agreement with the Chamber of Commerce of the Santa Barbara Region. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend City Council approval of a 5-year lease agreement with the Chamber of Commerce of the Santa Barbara Region for the 400-square-foot visitor center located at 1 Garden Street.
All right. Good evening, Chair Stedman, commissioners, members of the public. My name is Cesar Barrios. I am the Waterfront Business Manager. And today I bring to you the proposed lease agreement with the Chamber of Commerce of the Santa Barbara Region. And first, I'll begin by showing a diagram of the 400-square-foot building, space located at 1 Garden Street. It's right at the intersection of Cabrillo Boulevard. The Chamber of Commerce has leased the Garden Street Visitor Center site since 1998 from the Waterfront Department. The current lease expired on March 31st of 2023. And since then, they've been on a month-to-month basis. And the reason for the delay is because we've been negotiating their lease within the chamber and our city attorney. The lease specifies the use of the site primarily for nonprofit visitor information center, but also allows the sale of incidental items such as educational books, periodicals, directories, and logo shirts. The chamber also sells advertising space on their bulletin board located on the sidewalk, as well as tickets for the various visitor-related businesses such as the Santa Barbara Sailing Center and the Santa Barbara Trolley Company. Here you have the proposed lease terms. So they have a lease term of 5 years. There's no base rent for this site. But in lieu of the base rent, the visitor center is required to be open to the public at a minimum from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. daily, 360 days per year. The lease does not, however, have percentage rent, does have percentage rent requirement. On that, they are required to pay 10% of gross sales in excess of $70,000 in sales per year. As part of this agreement, the sales of third-party tickets, for example, the trolley tickets, Sailing Center tickets, and revenues generated by the advertising of the bulletin board are excluded under these terms. These lease terms are intended to enable the chamber to operate the visitor center as a public service and has never been intended to be a revenue generator for the city. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got, I actually stopped in there today and spoke with the lady working there. I'm in that parking lot a lot. And I guess one of the things I wanted to ask about, which is maybe a little too far away from the lease in particular, but are the bathroom hours there the same as the hours that they're operating, that they're open? Do we know that?
Commissioner Anderson, currently they are not. I believe they're open from 9 in the morning. Actually, they're open long beyond the scope of their hours of operation. During COVID, we had some significant issues with transients in that area. There was vandalism and other issues since the visitor center was not open. But I believe the restaurants are open on a daily basis now.
Great. Yeah, they were when I was there. And the transient situation is one that she brought up as being particularly concerning for her. You know, when I went there, I did go visit the bathroom, and there was a transient there with, you know, all of his shopping cart goods throughout the bathroom. You know, I saw one person walk in and turn right around and come out. She also mentioned she's found a number of needles in the parking lot before. And it seems like, because I know there's like a program where the people that are making a move from homelessness to an RV can have a shop set up there. Her thought was, you know, why is that in the parking lot that we're necessarily, well, it's like a kind of a gateway to Santa Barbara. And she, you know, she was voicing concern over the transient frequency there, the loudness, and a little disruption. So I don't know if there's a history or story of why the RVs are there overnight. I was just curious.
Yeah, Commissioner Anderson, yeah, that is the New Beginnings Safe Parking Program, and the city participates in this program with parking lots throughout the city. So we, as a waterfront, provide that one parking lot. The reason I believe in a lot of these was negotiated prior to my current role is the proximity to, one, restrooms during the day, and also the waterfront not providing oceanfront parking lots that are primarily highly used by our visitors, tourists, and locals. So part of the issue with vandalism and drug use that you referred to, we are aware of as a department. We've been actively working with PD for a long time, trying to mitigate these issues, and also with New Beginnings. And talking with New Beginnings, there hasn't really been a correlation between their clients and some of the individuals that PD has made contact with as far as committing crimes. It is an area adjacent to the train tracks. We do have some, like, throughout the waterfront area, nooks and crannies per se, where folks tend to habitate. And it's not just an issue at the waterfront. It's a citywide issue downtown and other areas throughout the city.
Yeah, I just have a comment with respect to that cute little building. My understanding of its history is it was donated when Andrea's was, it was a wholesale fish buyer on State Street, moved out of there. And so actually, I think either the chamber may actually own the building and we're only leasing them the dirt that it sits on. So 0 may seem like a small number, but they've really put a lot into that property that we did not have to.
Certainly, yeah, it is considered a historical building.
Was that Larco? The fish company, the seafood company, was it Larco?
I think it was just known as Andrea's. It's down in Ventura now.
Yeah. And my question to you, Caesar, is in excess of $70,000. What's the gross revenues generated by the facility? I mean, does it ever hit $70,000?
To my knowledge, they have not. At least from
Right.
from a
Just
brief
curious.
review that I did of their latest financials, they don't reach that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we ready for motions?
Unless there are other comments or contributions from the commission or the public.
I recommend that I move that we do the recommended action and recommend approval by the city council.
Yes, Commissioner Cohen?
Just really quickly, if they're not making over 70,000, is there any reason that we added that to the lease, just in case they do at some point? Or I don't know what the reasoning was.
Commissioner Cohen, as far as I'm aware, I've reviewed financials for the last 2 years, and a lot of that it's within COVID years. I know the $70,000 was formulated into the lease before that. But yeah, with the last few years and having low sales, I'm not aware of why exactly that was negotiated at that price point or that value.
Okay.
But I can
just
get back
was
to you on
curious.
that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll second Commissioner McCrae's motion.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner McCrae?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanowick?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to new business item number 3.
Item number 3, Commercial Fishing Work Group Update. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive an update from the Commercial Fishing Work Group discussing the need for additional commercial fishing and aquaculture slips and a review of the current visiting commercial fishing vessel slip policy. Discuss and take action as necessary.
Mr. Chairman, I want to, or to the members of the commission, I want you to take careful note of the photograph that's on that. That was taken by our chair, who also is a guest photographer for the Commercial Fisheries Work Group. Our report of the Commercial Fisheries Work Group concludes that there's a need for a greater allocation of commercial fishing slips and aquaculture slips, and recommends that the commission consider asking the department to do analysis of the issues raised in our report for further consideration by the work group and the commission. This is the first work group report since we dissolved the standing committees. It's important for you to realize that this report seeks to build on the tremendous investment that the city has made into the infrastructure for commercial fishing. It is not meant to suggest that it is anything but a generous and ongoing commitment that is greatly appreciated by the commercial fishing community. But it is an effort to say that since we've made that investment, why don't we build on it and optimize it? And that is the thrust, I guess, of our report. The report reflects the sort of the independent nature of work groups now. We basically, met informally with fishermen. We met informally with waterfront department staff. We met amongst ourselves a couple of times. So there's that recommendation that I was talking about, that we're hoping that the commission will in fact encourage the waterfront department to consider performing an analysis that would determine how, if at all possible, to create more slips. Next slide. I show this slide because it's important to realize that we didn't just pull this together very quickly. The report reflects a number of meetings. There were at least 2 publicly noticed and well-attended meetings of the commercial fisheries, or the commercial fisheries group standing committee, as well as a slip policy standing committee. This was discussed probably on 3 occasions by the board of directors of the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara. It involved meetings between representatives who are in the audience today and the waterfront, the work group. So there was a lot of activity to come up with this rather simple recommendation. And I found an old email from Mike Wiltshire that basically said, I feel it would be worthwhile to take a deep dive into all things commercial fishing, as we did with Slip Assignment Subcommittee, and he had a list of topics to consider, and one of those topics was, in fact, the discounted slip rates and their status. So with that, we are preparing this report. Let's see. And one of the things that we wanted to do was say, what is the justification? How do we get to a recommendation to do an analysis, to do consideration? And what we tried to do was take a look at official declarations and pronouncements from past and present to make that determination. And the first one was the Harbor Commission requested a meeting with the City Council to receive direction regarding the investment and the level of engagement that the City Council was comfortable with. And at the time, it was impossible to find public space for the infrastructure needs of the commercial fleet. Though the master plan had long referenced the need for gear and boat storage, it just hadn't come to pass. And the city council members who were assigned to it looked for it and couldn't find it. And so we were forced to look at private property. And you can imagine private property in the vicinity of the waterfront was incredibly expensive. So the Harbor Commission asked the council for some direction. That direction was received in the middle of the pandemic, and it included, the meeting included a presentation by the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara, where, among other things, they volunteered to, in fact, try to secure a property for the gear storage in a larger project known as the Maritime Collective. The response to the city was to completely approved the recommendation of CFSB, and there was essentially three recommendations. One was the infrastructure, the gear storage, and hopefully cold storage for that. The second was to have council oversight. The city council appointed council members Friedman and Jordan to provide oversight to make sure that this got done. And the other is the one that I've shown you here, to elevate the fishing and seafood industries as a city priority, to integrate the fisheries into the economic recovery of the city, and to develop an economic development strategy to get there. We thought that was a pretty strong recommendation, and for infrastructure and for us going beyond just gear, boat, and cold storage, and actually promoting the industry. Next slide, next slide. That pronouncement, that unanimous approval by the city council was followed by the first and only economic development plan ever approved and adopted by the city of Santa Barbara. And the seafood industry, the commercial fishing, was identified as a targeted industry. And in there, it says strengthen the local seafood industry to diversify the economy and through proactive planning. Emphasis on proactive planning. We'll touch on that again in a minute. Next slide. And the other thing that we found, and the reason we found this was because the commercial fishermen that I've been working with kept saying to me, Mike, there's some policy, there's something that says there's an allocation, and so sure enough, I always go to the Old Harbor Master Plan because it was comprehensive and it was thorough. And sure enough, in the opening chapters of that was a reference to a split, I guess we'll call it, or a ratio that had 19% of the slips at the time, 1996, were designated or were occupied by commercial fishermen, and 81% were occupied for recreation. And the goal of the Harbor Master Plan, as I read it, was to try to maintain that allocation. The words were strive, as I remember. And then the next step was I learned that there was a coastal development permit that was issued by the Coastal Commission to expand Marina 1, primarily Marina 1, but I think also Marina 4, and it referenced that master plan, and it, as basically a permit condition, challenged the department to try to achieve that 19% allocation. So from these actions, the recent actions by the city council, the establishment of an economic development plan, but specifically referenced fisheries, and then the Old Harbor Master Plan and the coastal development permit issued by the Coastal Commission, all encouraging more slips for commercial fishing, we thought that was pretty sufficient justification. We've got the master plan, the Coastal Commission, as well as the city council on 2 occasions doing that. So we felt that, next slide, that it wasn't inappropriate for us to ask for consideration to expand the number of slips available. And what we need to realize is that if you established this as an economic priority, what we learned was that it's not sufficient to simply consider a fishing vessel a boat. You need to consider a fishing vessel a business, an independent, small, family-owned business and food producer. And when you do that, it's a different ballgame in terms of trying to strengthen the industry. It makes it an economic priority and an economic development objective to have more businesses. And in my personal associations with two regional economic development organizations, one known as the REACH, which is in San Luis Obispo and does northern Santa Barbara County, and San Luis Obispo, and then the EDC, the Economic Development Collaborative, down is Ventura County, and southern that. They basically helped me learn that if each boat is a business, then an economic development strategy would be to meet with and try to better understand what those businesses need, because we want to keep those businesses there and we want to expand the businesses. So that's when the slip allocation policy and the availability of slips becomes important, because if you add one boat, one vessel, one small business, that's a success. That's a success. Everybody that I have met with, whether it's CFSB, whether it's fishermen, they all know that 1,143 slips are fully occupied. But when you look at this, we see on this chart, and this chart is I just basically pasted together a spreadsheet that Jeanette was kind enough to show me that suggests there's 45 commercial slips. I should say designated commercial slips, and there's a big distinction there. So when I was thinking 45, then I obviously do the math and go, okay, 19%. Well, 45 is barely 4%. It's barely 4%. So I said, that can't be right. And then Ray Kennedy, who'll speak to you later, and Tony Luna, they sort of did their own little independent survey, and they wandered around the marinas at the harbor, and they said that they were fairly confident that there were plus or minus 50 commercial fishermen that occupied slips that probably had been gained, don't know for sure, I'm not the expert, through recreational slip transfers. But anyway, that totals, at best, 90 to 100 slips. Still a far, far cry from 19%, and it's more like 8%. So therefore, we think there's a disparity there, that there may be a change in policy. There may be a planning way to make more slips available, because when you do that, you create a business every time you make a slip available. So we're not saying this is an easy task. We know there's a financial cost to this, but we're saying it would be worth investigating, given the council's support and obviously the Coastal Commission's support to protect and upgrade where possible. We think this is a legitimate exercise to undertake. There's no demands here. We're just saying do this. So to make this point, I want to say I found one other thing very interesting. So this is not if an analysis was done and a recommendation created, we found a glide path, if you will, to get this thing approved. We don't have to recreate or have new legislation. The municipal code, as it sits today, provides that it can establish preferential uses of the harbor for commercial fishing and aquaculture. And historically, there has been what is known as the slip occupancy policy for designated commercial fishing. And the last time that slip occupancy policy for designated commercial fishing was submitted to the City Council for approval, it was 2014. And at the tail end of that request and that policy, it said we should review this every 3 years. So should the Waterfront Department, working with the Commission and the work group, come up with something that might work, that conceivably could provide this, there is a methodology, there is a procedure in place to handle that. So I guess that's the conclusion of the report that John and I pulled together with John's help for the commercial work group. But I think to add to that request, what's really important is the fishing community and representatives of that community who have been dealing and want to be in the harbor and enjoy being in the harbor and all the benefits, whether it's the hoist, the ice, the ability to offload. But I think it's important that they tell their tale. And so as part of our presentation, I'm going to call on, if that's acceptable, Mr. Chair.
I think it is, as long as we also have the request slips.
Yes, we do have a handful of them.
And the first person I'd like to call on is Ray Kennedy. And I'll let him explain the nature of his small business and his long experience with the harbor.
So I'll just ask Mr. Kennedy for the commission that if you can consolidate your comments into 2 minutes, that would be ideal, but if it runs over, we're not going to cut the mic.
I'll do my best. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate Commissioner Nelson's presentation, and I want to compliment him on his thoroughness and due diligence there. These are very, very important subjects that we're addressing. I've been a commercial fisherman for 33 years, and in that time, I've had a bit of a bird's eye view of this entire situation. I've been on both sides of the commercial slip issue where I've had to use a visitor's slip, and then during the harbor expansion, I was one of 3 slips that were assigned to commercial fishermen. And I had to jump through some hoops and provide numerous years of tax documentation and so forth to prove that. So in that expansion, obviously, we had 19% allocated. 3 slips actually went to commercial fishermen. As we look at our seafood industry, it is growing. We are approximately at $40 million annually, and that is a tremendous influence on our community. It is an awesome trickle-down effect, and as such, I think it is really important that the city provide some availability rather than turn anyone away. When we turn other people away to other ports, that doesn't come through our city any longer. There is also a consideration that we refer to as the graying of the fleet, okay? Guys are getting older. It's really difficult for young guys to get in without some accommodation from the waterfront department. So as we see this industry grow, I think it is incumbent upon us to try to encourage that. And when we go further down, we will think about this little port becoming something like a mini San Pedro. We actually ship things and market approximately 60% of our seafood locally. Then there are statewide markets, and then, not to be discounted, there are international markets that we serve also. It's all money that comes through our community, and I think it's really important to encourage that growth. So I would like to see the waterfront department just a little bit more support and accommodation with that slip availability. And, God help us, it'll double and it'll keep going as these family-owned businesses that Commissioner Nelson has addressed. So I think I was under 2 minutes. I hope, do you have any questions, please?
I have one question that occurs to me listening to your remarks. How much Small Business Administration funding is available to a new fisherman?
Small Business Administration funding is generally limited to $25,000 per individual without any kind of collateral required. That's it. There isn't a slip available in the Santa Barbara Harbor for $25,000, that's for sure.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that.
Yeah, that is the minimum non-requirement or maximum non-requirement loan that they will extend, as far as I understand.
Very well. Commissioner Cohen?
I'm sure I should know this, but how much does the average slip go for?
That's an interesting question because commercial slips have a different value than recreational slips. All commercial slips have a commercial restriction on them.
Okay.
So they are about 1/3 of the value of a retail sailboat slip, for instance. And within 2 years, the permit transfer or the person that has the permit transferred to them must show $15,000 worth of commercial landings, and then every 2 years after that.
Do you have any idea how much they've transferred for in the past, or is that a question for?
There is an interesting situation that goes on with the commercial slips because they don't transfer much.
Okay,
Basically, as we know, with the way commercial slips transfer, or any slip transfer, you bring on a partner, and generally at some point that partner is eliminated. In the commercial avenue, a lot of times those people just stay partners for the duration of the slip permit. So we don't see a whole lot, and I think Mr. Wiltshire can confirm this, we don't see a lot of income from commercial slip transfers. And that's just because the cost is relatively prohibitive.
so they just stay on together as partners? I'm sorry, this is all new to me. I'm probably the newest commissioner here,
Okay,
so yeah.
that's a
this
very
is
valid
just,
question.
You know, so they just, when was the last time one transferred, can I ask?
Commissioner Cohen, I don't know exactly when one transferred, but there are very few transfers, so.
Not for
as-
years.
As you all know, essentially as quickly as policy is written, it's kind of needs to be rewritten, so it's very dynamic, but a lot of the times, as Mr. Kennedy is saying, they essentially create a partnership and it stays within that partnership, and so it essentially doesn't transfer.
When they create that transfer or that partnership, I'm assuming that one partner who owns the slip transfers something to the other person, and there's some sort of monetary change? Is that?
There is a monetary change for certain, and the documentation must all be in line so that all the parameters are met. And I think it's been about 2 years since a commercial slip transfer because one of them was in my name. And I think it went from my name to Miles Wallace, and
Okay.
I believe it was just over 2 years ago.
Sounds like I need to understand that.
And Commissioner,
more
the
fully.
the reality is the waterfront department is not necessarily privy to the private transactions that occur even on recreational slips. So we don't require that information. We don't necessarily know how much those slips are transferring for.
Oh, you don't,
That's a private transaction that we're not a part of.
it's not like when a piece of real estate transfers and you have to report it and you don't have to do
The
anything?
county does assess slip prices to apply county assessor's tax or.
Sure. But you have no record of who owns
We
what
don't. We
slip?
gather that data sort of organically from hearing about it from different sources, but we don't, when one of those transfers, it's not something we say, what did you pay on private to private for that transfer?
Okay.
So we're unaware of that data. We don't collect it.
However, Director Wiltshire, it is a number that's fairly forecastable, right?
Yeah, and as we went over in the slip assignment policy, we have sort of decades of general slip values for recreational. Mr. Kennedy's right, commercial fishing trades so infrequently, there's not a lot of data points, but even between a 35-foot slip, there can be huge variation in what people pay privately, depending on where it is, depending on what marina it is, all these different factors and what the market's doing, and so we just don't track that data.
Just so I'm clear, though, like, you have some sort of, like, if something is happening on a slip, you know who is the person to contact with regards to the activity on that slip particular.
Absolutely. Per our policy and per municipal code, yes, we have a contact who is a owner of the vessel and a slip permittee with us. If something else is occurring outside of our municipal code, that's a violation of our slip policy, and it could lead to termination of the slip.
Okay.
Commissioner McCray?
Yeah, Captain Kennedy, I have a question for you. This is a shoot from the hip question. I was just curious, what kind of annual gross income a commercial fisherman needs to make each year in order to kind of stay in business? What's a real number?
You know, this is Santa Barbara, so that's an interesting and loaded question. But we can generally figure that a commercial skipper may be able to retain about 60% of his gross income. Okay, if we work it backwards from there, what do we all need to survive here in Santa Barbara? Somewhere over $100,000, obviously. And that's for a full-time fisherman. I've been a full-time fisherman for 33 years, and so It's not an issue with the fishery that I'm primarily involved in with lobster, but there are other fisheries that are not as lucrative. And so, but they're all value to our community still. So it's running a business and running a fishing business. We have tremendous adversities that we look at all the time. You know, we're losing more and more fishing space as time goes on. We have increasing costs. As you well know, the fuel costs are exorbitant. And then we have to factor in our insurance and our maintenance and our slip fees if we are lucky enough to have a slip. Without a slip, many of the fishermen that are just coming into the industry, they have to pay a much higher premium just to keep their boat in Santa Barbara. But I think it's so important for our waterfront department to establish a policy where we don't turn those boats away. We don't send them to other ports. I think it's so important to bring those in to add to our seafood industry that is growing here. And I think that's an ongoing thing.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of fish.
That's a lot of fish. Keep catching them. Okay. Any further?
Nope. Any other questions? Angela, next speaker, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
The
Kennedy.
next speaker is Mick Croman, followed by Rick Gutierrez, Tony Luna, and Ava Schellenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's an honor.
The honor is mine. So may I have the opportunity to ask one question of one commissioner before I begin what I have to say?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I think it's important information. Are you a voting member on the board of directors of the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara?
No, I'm not.
Okay. When there's misinformation on your website, that's cool. Maybe it's a heads up because that's what it says on the website. Cool.
I'm not.
My name is Mick Cronman. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having me and allowing me to speak. I'm a former commercial fisherman, former harbor commissioner, former maritime consultant, former maritime journalist and author. I wrote what I think may be the only book on the history of our commercial fisheries here in Santa Barbara. And it's an honor to be here, and I wanted to address a few of the items in this report. And I can help clear up a few things, I think, because I was here when a lot of those policies were written. In fact, I co-authored some of them.
Sure.
You'll hear later that I'm embarrassed by a couple of things that happened that I was involved in these policies, but so be it. So first of all, I think it's worth remembering that in the local coastal plan, and please correct me if I'm misquoting this or stating it, that the working harbor, as the designation of a working harbor for Santa Barbara, includes priorities for commercial fishing and recreational boating. We hardly ever hear about the recreational boating side, no disrespect to anybody, but it's an important component of this. As you mentioned in your report, there are over 1,100 recreational slips, and as a co-priority, I wouldn't be surprised if they come to this commission at some point and say, wait a minute, you're dishing out slips and grants and this and that, the other, what have you, to the commercial fishermen. We want a slip fee rollback or this, that, or they may come with the similar demands, right? Also on the subject of a single interest group, a valuable, indispensable interest group in this harbor, the commercial fishermen, for whom I have a great fondness and I have many friends in the commercial fishing business. The same could apply to liveaboards. The liveaboards come to you and say, as recreational boaters and liveaboards, we're the eyes and ears on the water. We're the security on the water. We see the burglars. We're the first ones to see the fires start. We're the first ones to notice an intoxicated individual falling off the dock. And I was harbor operations manager for 19 plus years. I was Eric's predecessor. I think he's doing a great job. But I saw all that on my watch, okay? And so there are these other valuable interest groups in that recreational community that is a co-priority along with commercial fishing. They're not subordinated to one or the other. And I just think it's really important to keep that in mind, notwithstanding all the valid points you've made here tonight so far, Commissioner. And so I think I can address this 19% thing. I was hired in 2000, so I was in the middle of all that. And what happened was, when the Harbor Master Plan was drafted in 1996, it laid out some of these parameters, the 19% thing, but that was before some very significant events in the commercial fishing industry on the regulatory side, before nearshore gill nets were banned, before deep water trawling was banned, before the rock cod conservation zone was implemented, which is a huge area where you can't fish rock cod anymore, and before the establishment of marine protected areas. And so in 1999, I think Mr. Kennedy, or in 1999, and I think it was by 2000 we actually assigned those slips, there were very few, the 19% was like not possible to make, even if we had had the best of intentions. There were only a limited number of people on the waiting list, and I'd be willing to bet Ray was one of them probably, and that's how he got his slip. So it's not a number that necessarily applies to today's world. And it might be pushing the square peg through the round hole to meet that level. I'm not saying the discussion shouldn't be had, but from a policy perspective, and I have, beside my fondness for commercial fishing and many friends in the industry, I have a fondness for sound public policy. I'm very much married to the notion that we should do things in the greater public interest overall. So I hope that if you have a question, stop me at any time. I hope that helps clear that part up. So on the designated commercial fishing slips, I should probably start with an apology, because I was part of the team that wrote those rules and regulations, right? And as far as the 3 years go, we did every year consult with the commercial fishermen. Ray probably remembers this too. We'd have them in the room, we worked things out, and that's why there's so many sort of carve-outs in that resolution for crashed fisheries or NOAA fisheries research credit and all those kind of things. So those were negotiated on a yearly basis. I made a point of convening the fishermen. What do you want to change in this resolution? What's happening? And that kind of stuff. But ultimately, and I do feel badly about this to this day, it's one of, I'd like to think, limited things I regret in my tenure as the harbor operations manager, is we, I don't want to sound like a victim, but we allowed ourselves to be cajoled by political forces into this notion that $15,000 every 2 years is like making a living. And I think Ray couldn't have said it better, what a real commercial fisherman needs to make. So here I want to segue into a place where you and I will agree, I think, Commissioner Nelson. That is, I do agree that a 2-year study or so would be very advantageous to try and tease out these various issues. I mean, there are issues to be dealt with, like where do those extra slips come from, right? Do they, you know, if a slip, if somebody can't, a recreational boater can't transfer to another recreational boater anymore, they have to give it to a commercial, you know what I mean? Those will be issues that will have to be teased out. But most importantly, I didn't come just to criticize. I do actually have a recommendation I think can help get us to a better place in those discussions, and that would be raising that minimum landing requirement, because I can tell you for a fact, going back, if you'll allow me just a second here, we started by accepting tax returns until we found out you could print those on the internet and phone them. Then we went to slip landing tickets, fish tickets. And we found out if you have a receiver's license, you can order those from Fish and Game, and you can phony those too. And we ultimately landed on getting it straight from Fish and Game, which is now Fish and Wildlife, from their landings bureau, where they keep the data and what have you. It's still not foolproof. I'm sorry, I don't work for the administration, but I tell you it's not foolproof. And even at $15,000, I can assure you there are people that working the edges and what have you. I remember one individual would catch one swordfish a year and show $15,000 worth of earnings. And I was like, what do you put them on toothpicks and cater to the Montecito parties? How do you get to $15,000? So it's a challenge even at $15,000. So it doesn't mean they're out there all making, you know, big bucks. But if you'd reset the 2-year landing requirement, it's something reasonable, especially in light of what Ray said. And I don't know, Ray's a very successful fisherman, so he's probably not the benchmark for this. But if you made it something like $40,000 every 2 years, right? You could see after, say, a 2-year pilot study, who's making those landings, who's dropped out of their slip, who really doesn't have a chance of making it as a commercial fisherman or really is justifiably a commercial fisherman. And I think that might lend information to the notion of adding slips when maybe some could be filled that are now vacant. And it would help inform the discussion of where to go from there. It would really be a huge benefit to, I think, the waterfront and anybody involved in this policy making. I would also, and I'll try to close with this because I know I'm out of time, and thank you for your generosity. I would also close with this. It's important, or it's not without value to remember that the waterfront is managed in trust for the state, right? We make policies, you know, at the waterfront as trustees for the state. And if we start increasing or creating certain carve-outs or adding, well, I said increasing, but adding more slip space at cut rate, it's very likely you're going to draw a raised eyebrow from the state, especially the State Lands Commission. And you could end up regretting what you asked for and wishing you could go back to ground zero where you were. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had them.
Commissioner Nelson, you have a question?
Thanks a lot, Mick, for showing up. It's really great to have someone with your knowledge and expertise, not only in commercial fishing, but also the operation of the harbor. I want you to understand that nothing in the presentation that I tried to make for the Commercial Fisheries Work Group was meant to be accusatory or to suggest that anybody was doing anything but the best they could. What I'm saying is when you look at public policy, recent public policy where the city council expresses himself to us, expresses to us a city council advisory board, I think we should consider that encouragement and the actions that we take as a commissioner. And that's one of the reasons why I'm saying we should look at this issue. I'm not saying that we need 15 slips, we need 20 slips, we need 5. I'm just saying one more slip makes a huge difference, so it makes it worth the exercise to do that. Sure. And because you and others before you have established this way of communicating with the city council through this policy memorandum, it creates a vehicle for us to do the same thing. We're not starting from scratch. You've already been there.
Of course.
So for me, it's just
I never
it's just
took it that way personally. I don't work for the waterfront.
The issue with the percentage, we raised that because it clearly expresses the desire of the Coastal Commission. And I know that you are an expert on the regulatory closures of fisheries. I'm not even going to go there. But I obviously also recognize that what the commission was saying is we like a bigger number than.
Absolutely.
And all I'm saying is, can't we look at that question? Can't we look at that question?
Absolutely.
And it'd be a situation where the work committee, the work group, and the Harbor Commission would work with the Waterfront Department to do the right thing. That's all we're trying to do.
Understood, and please know that I didn't infer anything other than what you just described. But it's not without value to look at the 19% and those kind, and know that it was almost 30 years ago.
I agree completely.
And it's a different world now, and which begs the notion of different ways of looking at it, different policy solutions, and what have you. I just wanted to clear, I was in the room, as they say, and I think the intentions were good. And also, on a similar note, I think it's not unimportant to remember there's the Waterfront Department and the Harbor Commission as an advisory group, and then there's the City Council directive, and then there's the state. And not to repeat myself, but the state of California, including, the implementation of the Coastal Act and the local coastal plan, and I think the local coastal plan superseded the 1996. I think that was the intention, and rather than redo the harbor master plan, was to write a document that superseded the 96 plan. And I think the language I described, I think it's still in there. Please correct me if I've gone astray. But I think that's the modernization of that local coastal plan, because some of those, and I don't know, and my guess would be maybe not, that 19% is still in the local coastal plan, because it superseded the harbor master plan. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
please.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that the Coastal Commission continues to say that protect the infrastructure and upgrade it where possible. And this policy, deep dive, if you will, could take a look at whether or not we can
Absolutely.
protect and upgrade.
I think you and I, particularly Commissioner, are on the same page relative
Okay, well, good.
to study and take that deep dive and get down into it. But maybe the one caveat for me is, I think it starts with seriously considering raising those landing requirements significantly. And because right now, at 15,000, quick math, like 625 a month, I don't think there's anybody here who can survive on 625 a month and let alone, the fact we're in Santa Barbara. And that way, you'll find out who your real fishermen are, quite frankly. I don't know other way to be candid about it. But I totally agree that this is a worthy idea and worthy of studying moving forward, with an eye towards, gymnastically, if you will, thinking about the waterfront slip policies moving forward.
Okay.
So, thank you so much. I really appreciate you allowing me a little extra time.
That's good.
Thank you, Mick. Angela?
Next speaker is Rick Gutierrez, followed by Tony Luna and Ava Schollenberg.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good evening.
And Commissioner Nelson, especially for inviting me on this subject, because I've been running the kelp cutter, a local kelp cutter, which is the only kelp cutter in the nation, for the Cultured Abalone Company. And it's been 11 years. I didn't ever think that I'd go out of retirement from fishing after fishing for 35 years. And so I want to just clarify one thing. We're really not going to get any more fishing industry in Santa Barbara than we already have if we don't allow fishermen, new fishermen, to find slips to stay here. If we hinder their approach, just like what Mr. Ray Kennedy said, if we hinder their approach in the beginning of the business. I can remember when I first started my business in 1974. And during that time, that was the biggest hurdle that I managed to accomplish in my business, was not only to get my boat, get the financing for my gear, but to find a slip. It was 50% of what I spent on my business. And today, it's way more than that, way more than that. But it also depends on the kind of fishery you're getting into. So I'm just kind of at odds right now with any of the policies that are being made or have been made to the amount of commercial slips that are in Santa Barbara. We've been dealing with this for the last 40 years that I've been in the business. And I just would like to see one policy, and that's the policy that we give the commercial fishermen a chance to survive in Santa Barbara. We can survive. If we can survive the ocean, if we can survive 45 years of fishing and making enough money to live in Santa Barbara, we can survive one policy so that we can have a slip here in Santa Barbara. That's the first thing that most fishermen are trying to figure out. How can we keep our boat here? I can go to Ventura and not worry about, I can get in any slip anytime for half the price. But the cost of my getting to the areas that I want to fish, the cost of having to drive there every day, if I work a daily fishing job, or just to drive and to stay there. Why would I want to not just live in Ventura? Well, I don't. I bought my home in 1982 from the money of fishing that I made from fishing. So in this aspect, I would like to just see one policy in the harbor for commercial fishermen. Commercial fishermen have always brought the money here to Santa Barbara. They've kept it here in Santa Barbara. We bought homes here. We raised our children here. We've done everything that every citizen in Santa Barbara has done outside of the harbor, and we survived. So in retrospect now, looking at that, now I'm looking at the fact that Yeah, Mr. Coleman, I've worked with Mr. Coleman for many years, and we helped start the commercial Saturday market, commercial fishermen's Saturday market. That's kind of what we expect from the city of Santa Barbara, that we have an access to be able to make money and to show our fish to the public, to the locals. But now we have this really unique situation going on, because now I'm on the other side. I'm on the aquaculture side. I don't know if you guys have noticed, there is now a kelp farm growing outside of Santa Barbara. A kelp farm. It's the only one on the West Coast. The University of San Diego is right now trying to figure out how they can get permits to grow kelp on the coast of California, where we've lost 95% of our kelp in the coast of California. 95. And I'm not talking bull either. I'm telling you from the observation that I've done from the last 10 years. I have records of different areas that have been depleted by kelp. And so we are trying to get an aquaculture, and the state wants an aquaculture consortium here in not only in Santa Barbara, but all up and down the coast. If you want, we have one of the only farms, we're the only surviving farm in Southern and Central California for abalone. And we also feed urchins. We feed the smaller urchins, which haven't been marketable ever. And now we're marketing them. But do we need an avenue? First, we need a place to start our business in, to put our boats in. I've been paying for the last, not me, but the company's been paying for the last 12, 15 years. I started 11 years ago, and before that, the boat was here. Been paying visitor slips. I don't know if you know what that is. That's about $14,000 to $15,000 a month. That's just for one boat. And I don't sell my kelp. I feed the animals that make the company money. We're not allowed to sell the kelp in the state of California. They won't give you a permit. But we have the only vessel in the state of California that has a permit in the licenses to run a machine that actually cuts the kelp. And we only go down a foot. We don't cut the whole thing. We just cut the layers that are on the surface, and then it grows. Within 2 weeks, I have another sprout. I'm a farmer. I used to work as a fisherman farmer. Now I'm a kelp farmer. So, folks, think really strongly about one policy for the fishermen, commercial fishing industry, because I'm going to retire again. I'm 75. I'll probably retire within the next 5 years. I've given my company another 5 years. You think I'll live to 80? Okay, what's going to happen is I'm trying to train a guy right now to run that boat. Same with him, with Kennedy. He's trying to get young men to come in. Everybody, I mean, I sold my operation, my fishing operation, to 2 younger guys. And the first thing they said was, man, I'm sure glad that you gave me a slip with this thing. See, that's the whole thing. We need a slip. I don't know about you guys, but 19% does not sound like a lot, especially if you extrapolate the 45 slips that we're supposed to have and being only less than 4%. It's 3.9, by the way. So I'm just telling you guys that's what it is. Do the math. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Angela?
Tony Luna, and then Ava Schollenberg.
Thank you, Commissioners, for giving me a moment here. I'm going to try and be brief. I won't go too much into the whole thing that these guys have already gone over, and I hope you have some questions for me, because I want to extrapolate a little bit on what Mick has said and also on what Ricky said. I mean, obviously, the ultimate goal is to have more slips, okay? As we can just tell from the discussion, this is not going to be an easily attainable thing. We're not going to build a new finger. There's not enough in the harbor to just create more. So maybe this is a long-term process. Maybe they can, if the waterfront does do the analysis, they'll come up with a solution to maybe slowly achieve a goal, at least for the fishermen that are needed. And maybe it's not a percentage thing. So I look at it as a 3-prong problem. One, just the main goal, not enough slips. And I talked about the solutions. Build new slips, probably not possible. The second thing, maybe possibly slowly reassign some of the visitor slips as commercial slips. Maybe that's a possibility. I don't know. This is more of a solution thing. The third thing, and I think Nick touched on it, is, the harbor's been doing a great job with this, the waterfront department lately, is to pressure the non-compliant commercial fishermen to vacate their slips. Because I know the guys that are out there. We all know them, the guys that aren't full-time, hard-working fishermen. They got their boats, so they got a slip, they want to keep it. Oh, I'm going to retire here. Well, you're not a commercial fisherman anymore. Get a recreational slip. So the waterfront has been doing a great job of that. As a matter of fact, I had to come in last week just to show all my documentation, all my current fishing license for the year. They're making everybody do that on a yearly basis. I applaud you guys for kind of stepping that up. I appreciate that. And I think Mick has a really valid point that the $15,000 every 2 years is ridiculous. I don't know any real commercial fisherman in the harbor that doesn't make 3 times that, at least. So that's not even, to me, I've asked why they haven't done that in the past. So thanks for bringing that up, Nick. I think that's a very good point. So the other 2 prongs that I think I can address here is the second goal would be just the short-term goal. Do we accommodate the handful of long-term commercial fishermen that don't have slip leases? So the waterfront doesn't really turn you away. They won't do that. They'll let you use a guest slip, okay? And they do have a good policy with guest slip, which does give the commercial fishermen a discount over the recreational guys. Now, I've been a commercial fisherman since 1989, about as long as Ray, and been in and out of guest slips, had trailer boats. The last 7 years, I've had a boat that had to be in the slip. So, and in that time period, the visitor slip, even with the discount, has become exponentially greater. So that is kind of the problem. Even though we can get a temporary slip, a visitor slip, and ultimately the goal would be to have a full-time slip, it's still quite a bit of a financial difference. For example, Marina 1A, which is all commercial slips, there's 2 visitor slips, the first 2 slips there, they're all 35-foot slips. And all of our friends, I got quite a few friends on that slip, they pay about $190 a month for their rent. They own the lease, because none of us own the slips, okay? And people say, I own the slip. I say, no, you don't. City owns the slip. So they own the lease. Another friend of mine, new fisherman, got a boat, went into that 35-foot slip. His rent was $1,050 a month. Just to give you perspective on the difference there. So, you know, if it was, when I started, it was double. It was doable, okay? I don't own a lease, fine. But now it's just every year it gets more and more and more for whatever reasons. You know, the waterfront needs to make money. I think, you know, I talked to Mike about this. And you know, they get put between a rock and a hard place, and they poll all the slip holders. We need to bring more income. Where do we do it? We pass it on to the visitors, the transients, okay? Because there's people coming through. So I'm not advocating to change that policy. I think the policy they have for visitor slips is fine. Now, if you're a commercial fisherman and you go in and you show your fish tickets that you are actively commercial fishing, they keep you on the discounted rate. And that's the discounted rate, $10.50. I'm just using one slip as an example so you get a perspective of the difference. And you prove your commercial fishing, they give you this, which is half what a recreational slip holder's fee would be over the period of time. So I'm not proposing that we would change that. And this is just food for thought. If the waterfront does, think that the analysis would be a good thing, I'm just throwing some ideas out there. And maybe Commissioner Cohen, and I know some of you might have questions, so I'm enlightening you on a lot of this conversation. So I think the system they have is fine, but there's a handful of us, 6 or maybe half a dozen guys that have been here for years. I mean, months and months and months, and paying this over and over. So it starts to add up. I wouldn't propose to change a transient fisherman that's coming from Santa Cruz and he's staying here for a month to fish halibut and then he's going to San Diego to fish tuna. Don't need to change that. But there's some of us residents who cannot get a lease. I've been trying to get one. I've been trying to purchase one on the private market, and it's not as easily said as done. As we attested, they don't change hands. They go through this kind of thing. So I think there's possibly some solution to do this, to offer some long-term relief for the local guys to use a visitor slip a little bit more in line with the fees of the other commercial fishermen. In doing so, you would have to, they could make some criteria possibly. You'd have to have been there for 12 months, 24 months, whatever, first, before you can even get, let's call this a temporary commercial slip or a residential commercial slip. Come up with some sort of slip that fits this niche until we can get that long-term goal of having more slips for everybody. And, you could come in, you could prove your paperwork, they could set the bar higher financially if they, might be a good stepping stone to initiate this higher annual fee that all the fishermen would have to come up with. Instead of $15,000 every 2 years, it would be $50,000 every 2 years, $40,000, whatever. Say that, boom, we come and prove it, you show, oh, we look in the records, you've been here for 24 months, good, you qualify, you live in the county, whatever stipulations they need, you get a stamp on your visitor card, and you get something more in line with what the other commercial fishermen are paying as slip-wise. So that was just a thought that I had. And then the third prong I would like to see happen is to hold these long-term commercial fishermen that are in these slips to the same financial standards that the other commercial fishermen have to do. Let us come in and show the yearly thing. I have to come in every 2 weeks with 2 fish tickets and go to the harbor and show my fish ticket and stamp it and pay my fee. One fish ticket a week. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that I could also just say, come in every year and show me that I grossed $100,000 or whatever the number you guys decide is realistic. I think that's not asking too much, and it would be a lot simpler for a lot of us. Sometimes I've been out at sea fishing and forget to come in and pay, and I come back and there's a boat in my slip. Oh, shoot, you didn't pay, we gave your slip to somebody else. And it's not the end of the world. You move to another slip, but all my stuff's there, my buoys are there, stuff's in the dock. So just, again, I think it's a 3-pronged thing. Obviously, we need more slips. I'm hoping they could offer maybe a temporary commercial slip or a residential commercial slip, and then hold us all to the same financial bar. Don't make us that are here in the long term show a fish ticket every week. Let us just come prove it. And I think that would weed out also a lot of the guys that are not really commercial fishing. So, any questions? I'm looking at you, Commissioner Cohen. I know there's a lot of information. I tried to talk fast and just get it all out, so.
I don't know if this is a question for you. I think it's probably more for staff, but
Okay.
Is there a separate list for those people that want, are fishermen looking for a slip versus and I realize the list doesn't move, and I'm learning a lot on all of that. But I'm just wondering how many, you're saying there's only a handful of people really who have businesses, who are fishermen in the harbor that are unable to get slips. And I don't know if you're on some sort of wait list that doesn't move. Sorry if that's a naive question.
Well, you correct me if I'm wrong, but there used to be a list in years past. When I first started, I had a trailer boat, so I would put it in for 6 months at a time, wait for one to come off the list. Oh, we got one for you. It was a smaller boat, so smaller slips aren't as difficult to come by. It'd be in that slip for that price for X amount of time. I'd take it out, go back on the list. Well, the list started to become so long because people were doing this, put your name, I'll sell you my slip. Nobody was going down the list. So this list, no new names were being added to the list. Am I correct, Jeanette? So it was very complicated. I've learned a lot from Jeanette and Mike as well through this, and Susan before her, and Kathy before her. So it's a very complicated process that got very convoluted along the way. There's no easy solution. So my second and third prong, I think, are just simple steps that could be taken pretty easily, pretty quickly. Obviously, we're not going to build a new finger and say, here's a 19% slips. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Hopefully, we can address it and find some solution for that. But in the interim, I don't think it's asking too much to do these simple things. Did that answer your question about the list?
Yeah, I think so. I hear about this, and I probably should have this conversation with staff at some point instead of, using everyone's time. But I just don't know if there's like a separate designation for fishermen and commercial people that are waiting to have a permanent home versus the general public.
Commissioner Cohen, at a really high level, we have commercial fishing slip permittees. So they're permanent. They pay a discounted rate of roughly 50% off the monthly recreational slip rate.
Sure.
And then we additionally offer our visitor slips. So we have a pool of visitor slips that can be used by recreational boaters. We offer those to commercial fishermen. The rate, if you're a recreational boater, is $2.50 per foot per day for your vessel, and that will be as of July 1st this year. The rate for a commercial fisherman, like Mr. Luna, who proves his fish tickets and comes in and says, hey, I'm either visiting, I'm from out of town, I'm here for 2 weeks, I'm here for a month, their rate is $1 per foot per length of their vessel. That hasn't changed this year or last year, I believe. We held that at $1 per foot. And then there's a smaller subset, which Mr. Luna is in, where it's this sort of like full-time visitor. So Mr. Luna's
Sure.
here, he's in Santa Barbara, the visitor slip's available. He deems it worth his while as a business owner to pay that rate, and he's kind of here semi-full-time. So there's sort of a mix, but the reality is we open our visitor slips to commercial fishermen.
I understand that. I guess what I'm trying to understand is the scope of the problem. I mean, are there 5 people that are, in this situation? Are there 20 people that are in this situation? And I assume that if a fisherman is in this situation, they're doing something to try to remedy the problem. I mean, it's like, I would liken this to being on a list for getting an apartment or something like that. You're on the list and you understand where you stand in that. And I just don't know if there's any data that, other than just talking to the people that are here today, that is kept by the waterfront. That's
Yeah.
my.
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, whatever that list doesn't move. And so you've heard from the commercial fishermen here, the commercial fishing slips just don't change hands that often. And that's usually they kind of find a way to have them not change hands. Our slip policy for commercial fishermen to date has been very, very permissive for those who have slips to keep them. Our bar for requiring to prove their business is very, very low, as we're hearing here today. So I don't disagree. Looking at this policy would be a great step forward. When I came here 3 or 4 years ago, it was front of mind. That email that I sent to Mr. Nelson was probably 3 years ago. But it's been hard to get started. Honestly, thank you all. This has been the most open and robust discussion that we've had on this to date. I've been personally not so nicely yelled out of a couple meetings in the past, and so it's a contentious item, to be really, really honest. It's a contentious item. So the idea that we're even talking about it and there's a willingness to look into it is great, and of course staff is willing to do that. But with that comes a full dive into this, and it's not always just the good of getting more slips. We want to define that exact problem you're saying. How many people are in slips getting the discount who maybe aren't fishing as much as more? So we really want to balance that and have a real look at this if we're going to. It's not just, hey, let's get a much more fishing slips before we clean our house up. So there's a lot of policy work to be done.
But just so I'm clear, it doesn't sound like there is some sort of list of who is trying to remedy that situation. I'm sorry, does that make sense?
How many visitors are waiting for a permanent
How many
commercial fishing slip?
fishermen are waiting for a permanent home? That's the number that I'm looking at. How many local fishermen are we talking about that need a home?
Yeah, and that's tough to say offhand because there's fishermen who trailer their boat in every day. There's
Sure.
fishermen who visit and keep their boat
But
down.
I would
And so
assume
if-
those people are not looking for a permanent home if that's their, or maybe they are, I don't know.
I
But
think
yeah.
they would be. I think there's
Okay.
a number of people who boat and trailer their boat in to fish as a profession who would love a chance at a commercial fishing slip.
Okay.
And I think I might be able to answer your question a little better. There's not a list that you can put your name on to
Okay.
wait for them to become available, because what happens is nobody puts their slip back onto the list. They'll say, Ray's gonna retire. He says, hey, you wanna get my slip? Sure. He puts my name on his title. It's a shady deal on the black market, I call it. I go, people are selling the leases on the black market. It really shouldn't be
I'm
happening.
learning.
Okay? So let's just cut to the chase. And then, obviously, the city makes money on the transfer fee, which if anybody's name goes, city gets a nice paycheck from that, which I'm fine with. That's fine, but
Okay,
I'm not really keen on the other end of the deal. So
I get it.
I hope that answered your question.
I'm learning.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have one more speaker, is that correct, Angela?
All right, thank you.
Yes, last speaker is Ava Schulenberg.
Good evening, Harbor Commissioners. My name is Ava Schulenberg, and I have been on the staff of Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara as a program specialist for the past 2 years, in addition to working as a deckhand on a lobster, rock crab, and rockfish boat myself. Unfortunately, Chris Voss, who's the president of the association, and Kim Selko, who's the executive director, are not able to be here tonight. So I am here to represent CFSB in endorsing the recommendation of the Commercial Fishing Work Group that the Waterfront Department should review its slip assignment policies and consider the development of a programmatic effort to provide additional allocations of designated commercial slips and improvements to the visiting vessel program. I conducted a survey last year with over 70 fishermen and other Blue Economy stakeholders. A lot of those folks that I interviewed are actually in this room right now. And that revealed immense gratitude for the benefits commercial fishermen currently receive in our harbor, such as the ice house, public hoists. These are things that Commissioner Nelson mentioned earlier. And there's no discounting those perks, but there was also a great emphasis placed on how difficult it is to get started as a commercial fisherman due to factors like obtaining a slip. There's no question that those already residing in commercial slips have a gracious situation in their hands, but for those who do not have that privilege, it is difficult to maintain a business while paying higher fees due to a lack of commercial slips. And that's really what each of these boats represent. Again, to Commissioner Nelson's earlier point, each one is a small family-owned business, so even just one more boat in the harbor is essentially adding one more business to our community. In fact, Santa Barbara City College recently commissioned an analysis of the future job market in Santa Barbara County and found that there is approximately a 34% increase projected in the number of jobs within the commercial fishing industry in the next 5 years. This increase is in line with other trends. Sales of local seafood are very much on the rise. Stock assessments are solid. We've got more fishermen coming, so now is the time not only to fortify our infrastructure, but build on it as well. This data brings hope to our fishing community, but it also brings concern around where incoming fishermen will be able to keep their boats if there are not enough commercial slips available. In summary, the commercial fishing community is extremely grateful for all the benefits they are currently granted, but the need for more commercial slips is backed by both the fleet as well as third-party data. Any improvement of this issue is a positive investment not only in the fishermen who are in need of a commercial slip immediately, like some of the folks in this room, but it's also an investment in the subsequent fishing generations to come. Anything that can be done to improve the state of this necessary element of infrastructure is greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time. And I can also answer any questions, but probably not as well as these guys behind me.
Thanks, Eva.
Thank you.
Art, did you want to make a comment? Commissioner McCray?
When the time comes.
Sure, okay. He's on reserve. Commissioner Nelson, are you complete?
Yes, I mean, that's our presentation, and would hope that the full commission would favorably consider a request. I mean, it has to be careful. We can't ask for a report, but we can request that the Waterfront Department consider doing an analysis of both the availability of slips and how it might be increased, as well as the visitor guest policy. And would hope that we could be part of that, much like the slip transfer group went, that we would work together to come up with a recommendation for the full commission.
Very well.
So we've heard a lot of good ideas considered and some agreed to by pretty much all around the table with respect to finding out who the real commercial fishermen are in our community. I want to introduce one last piece to this and suggest one other item for potential analysis. I think it's a challenge to have undervalued slips coupled with transferability. I think it's painted us into a corner before, broadly. Nobody wins by it except for the initial grantee of that slip lease. What ends up happening is once a person owns that slip, they ultimately end up selling it on the black market, as we've heard. And then the buyer ends up paying full steam value, so much so that people don't even bother to invest in them and pay the visitor slip rate. I want to suggest that if we do happen to find a spare slip somewhere that we can discount to a commercial fisherman, that we also consider making that non-transferable so it cuts that link. So that when that person comes out of that slip, it goes back into the lottery and the next new commercial fisherman has a shot at it. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Vice Chair?
I just want to thank you guys for the presentation and all the information. I know a lot of work went into this, but I just have some questions, just because I'm not so knowledgeable on the fishing industry. But, and anybody, the question to the, the work group or anybody here, but in just terms of demand, and I know one of the bolded items on the report was to elevate the fishing industry. And, I've never had a problem purchasing fish. I mean, I've gone to the market on Saturdays, no problem. I know the fish market sells local, they have the signs there. I've checked the websites for Shellfish Company and the Fish House, and they all say they source local. And I'm just curious, is there any kind of proof of demand not being met for fishing in the community?
Whatever demand there is, that is not, I think I can speak enough of the here, that isn't accommodated within the community is then available to be distributed statewide and then internationally, as we've found. As our fisheries grow, not only will our community be served on a more regular basis, those other distribution centers and distribution possibilities will expand too, as we see a statewide shipment or an international shipment. All of which things are very valuable for our local community because money all trickles through here.
And I don't have the exact numbers, but Mick mentioned earlier about the state keeping track. The state keeps track of every pound of fish that's sold and who bought it and where they're from. So one of the things that we noticed when we did analysis of the 2020 data is that because of the pandemic and the closure of restaurants, that suddenly there was a spike in the interest in local seafood. And that was documented by the state. The state could basically see that between 2019 and 2020, that sales, local sales went up. And that is a really good trend because historically, about 85% of the Santa Barbara fish that are caught in the channel, they're shipped, they're exported. And about the same number, 80%, is imported for our consumption. So obviously, there's a trade imbalance there, that there's a trend that's improving. And it's easier, a fisherman who doesn't have to, have a deal to ship his fish to LA, it's better if he can sell it locally. And so it's a market that's trying to be encouraged, not discouraged. And it's important to also realize that they're food producers. I mean, everybody wants to save the farmers, and so do I. But these folks are farmers, and we talk about sustainability all the time. We're all, is this sustainable? Is this sustainable? You can't be a fisherman in the state of California without being sustainable. I mean, you can't keep a permit if you're not doing it in a sustainable way. So it's a positive industry with high protein, high value food, and I think that the city council is wise to suggest that we promote it as an economic priority.
Okay, great, thank you. Also, I have one question regarding the visiting fishing vessel policy. I have a lease to a slip, and I've had a transient slip next to me for quite some time, and fishing boats come into that slip. And it seems like, they're out fishing, they come in, they unload the fish for a day or two, and then they leave. And I'm just kind of wondering just about how long typically does a visiting fishing boat stay in a slip in Santa Barbara? Because it seems like a quick turnaround, but I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of looking for information on that. Yeah.
Just one second, Tony. Nobody online can hear anybody from out there unless they're up at this microphone. So it's just kind of like yeah, sure. It's up to the chair, actually.
Elaborate on this a little bit.
Absolutely, thank you.
There's a lot of guys that are part-time commercial fishermen, and they'll put, the white sea bass are biting, for example, they'll put their boat and they'll fish sea bass for a week or two or whatever, and then they'll go back on the trailer and go back to their regular job. There's also people that are transient fishermen going from one harbor to another, from Ventura, like I say, to Morro Bay. When the salmon bite, unfortunately we don't have a salmon season this year, but guys will leave Santa Barbara and they'll work their way all the way up to Fort Bragg. So they'll be using visitor slips on the way up and on the way back. So those could be, that type of thing that you're seeing. There's also a handful of us, 6 or 8 of us, that this is our home harbor. It's been my home harbor since 1989. And so we're here all the time. I go obviously from the Channel Islands to Point Conception to Carpinteria is basically my zone. But this is the base harbor, so I'm always in there. And sometimes I have to move from one visitor slip to another for various reasons. But so that could be another reason why you see people come in and out. Depending on the size of the slip next to you, I think if it's a smaller slip, it's probably a trailerable boat. People put their boat in, fish for a while, take it out, because it is, expensive. Easier to keep it on your trailer in your driveway. And maybe just, I could refer back to your previous question. I also have a seafood wholesale business, and I can sell more fish than I can catch myself. With the exception of my lobster permit, because like Mike alluded to, a lot of that is shipped overseas. But for example, right now, the demand for halibut is bigger than I can catch. I bought some today. I bought 110 pounds day before yesterday from another fisherman, and it's all went local, all in the county. So the demand is definitely there for the local product, and I'm just trying to diversify in my gray age, as Ray would say, and I pick myself up. So I hope that.
Great, yeah, thank you very much, appreciate it. I also have a follow-up question for the waterfront. In terms of people that currently own slips, like if you currently own a sailboat, can you sell your sailboat, buy a commercial fishing boat, and then be a commercial fisherman in that slip? Or how would that work? Is that possible, or has that been done before?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, that's a nuanced question. I'll let the pro come up, Jeanette.
Okay.
She lives in that world.
Come here instead of over there, I guess. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeanette Prusinski, Administrative Supervisor. I met with.
Welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you. So the answer is yes.
Okay, no, that's
Yeah,
great.
you
I mean, there's obviously a market then. The market has decided, I guess, so.
Right. So what they've been speaking about, we have the designated commercial fishing slips where you can only have a fishing boat, which you have to prove on a certain schedule that you are continually making an income from fishing. But for pleasure craft slips, you can sell your sailboat, you can change careers and become a fisherman and continue to keep your slip, and as long as your boat fits and you own it, you would continue to pay standard rates.
Okay.
And so, and we do not track that through my office. So I don't know how many people do this, but I wouldn't be surprised if there would be as many as they said earlier.
So even if you proved your commercial fishing, you'd have to pay the standard rate? Is there a way to?
No, I'm sorry. In the example that I thought you were asking, if you had your own personal slip that you.
Oh, right, yep.
Right, and sold your sailboat and became a fisherman and bought a fishing boat, you can put your fishing boat in your slip and be a fisherman. I will not track that. I will not have you prove to me any of that. You have whatever career anybody has in a personal slip.
Okay. No, great, thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, I guess I said just one final comment to make, but yeah, I mean, I read through the coastal plan, and as Mr. Croman mentioned, yeah, it mentions pretty clearly ocean dependent, and it calls out specifically commercial fishing, and it calls out recreational boating, and I feel like if we are going to take from one and give to the other, that's it's not really equitable, not really fair, and also not really needed in this case. I think that the real issue at hand is really just a misallocation of resources is what it sounds like. And specifically, just finding noncompliance in terms of who are the fishermen and where it is needed most. So I just want to kind of close with that for my comments. I think that's kind of important. Those the resources, they're valuable, and defining who those people are that really need them and who fit into that fisherman conduit. So that is, I think, the main issue at hand. But would definitely welcome further analysis on the topic.
Yeah, well said. I'll make one final comment to it. Thank you very much, Commissioner Nelson, for your research. And thank you, Mick, for being an original source. So thank you very much to both of you. Unless anyone else wants to speak, we'll move on to the next item.
There is no hands raised online, and I don't have any additional speaker slips, but if anyone online would like to speak, they can indicate that by raising their hand.
Yeah, for the commissioners, your request to speak button is not showing up. Yeah, so did you want to make a comment, Commissioner Cohen?
I wanted to make a comment. When we moved, well, two things. One was when we moved from subcommittees to work groups, my understanding was when we did that, that if there was an issue that that other commissioners wanted to attend, that perhaps we could also use the Brown Act to attend a meeting. I don't know if that's a possibility or not. I've learned more sitting here today than I could ever, learn anywhere else. And so if there's a possibility for having a meeting with the fishermen that is under the Brown Act, then perhaps that would be a conversation to have. The other thing that I wanted to ask was, you're looking for a motion, is that right?
Yes.
For a motion to request a study?
We can request that the department consider doing a study.
Consider doing a study.
And that would be a study or an analysis that they would come back to the work group and the commission for future discussion. But the objective is to determine whether or not it is possible to create more slips for commercial fishing. And while we're doing that, analyze the vessel slip, the guest vessel slip program. So it's
So moved.
okay.
Before we take a second, let me make a comment about getting information. The information is generally available. There are existing work groups that are producing more information and applying focus to the issues that we all talk about. So I just want to get that reminder out to everybody. The information's already there. So you can attend any work group you want. You can watch tapes, talk to people.
Can I attend a work group? That's a question for
Yeah,
Director
I mean, the
Wilshire.
intent of the work group is really an information gathering body. They are supposed to be out there gathering information and bringing it back to yourselves, the Harbor
Correct.
Commission. So any pertinent information. They're not necessarily supposed to be action bodies. They're not supposed to be making decisions and taking
Right.
actions. That is under the purview of all of you as Harbor Commissioners.
That's right.
You all have that authority.
Yeah, I agree 100%. My point is the information's out there and, we're working through most of this stuff. So
Sure.
I don't think there's
But I
any
can't.
prohibition.
No, my understanding was I cannot attend a work group that is outside of a work group that I've been assigned to. Is that
That is correct.
that is correct?
That would be a violation of the Brown Act.
That would be a violation of the Brown Act. So the only way that I can attend is if it is under the Brown Act. So I'm just asking to consider that as an option because I can't attend otherwise, right?
But we have a vacancy on our
Yeah,
work group.
which is what we're going to get to that next.
Never
So,
mind. I didn't hear.
does anybody want to second Commissioner Cohen's motion?
Second.
Okay, Angela, let's take a vote.
Wait.
Yes?
Now's the chance, now that's been moved and seconded. Now's the chance, now that it's been moved and seconded, for us
You
to
wanna
have
discuss?
discussion. So, I just want to ask staff if you're game for this challenge.
Thanks, Chair McRae. This is really a Harbor Commission question and a bandwidth question. So when we had that priority setting workshop back in December, my whole goal and the staff's whole goal was to figure out what you all as Harbor Commissioners wanted to deal with. As you know, these policy efforts take time. They're not overnight. They take a lot of staff time. They take a lot of Harbor Commissioner time. You guys essentially have 10 meetings a year, and so plus work groups and whatnot. Staff has limited time. We can only take on so much of this policy stuff at a time. We saw the last year, we kind of looked at slip assignment policy, dug in there, made some substantial changes. Our job, we're constantly going to be changing policy. It's just a matter of what policy we're working on at that time. this was not the item that rose to the surface of that priority setting workshop. So our hope as staff was to kind of project what we were going to do in a year and stick to it. But it is up to the Harbor Commission to pivot as you see needed and bring things in front of each other. And so the answer is yes, if that is what you want to work on, and forego what the other priorities we had set. Because there really is only so much work that the Harbor Commission and staff can do at one time. And this is a big lift.
Commissioner Stanwyck.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to just thank everybody for the public comments, really. You know, more information, more discussion, it just better helps us. So thank you all. That's it.
Commissioner Cohen.
I just want to say that I fully understand that there's only so much bandwidth that we have within, within the staff. But I don't think that, at least in the motion that I made, I'm asking for a specific timeline. I think that we're saying, put this in, where you feel like it can be appropriate. So I don't want that to be misread. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just kind of, and again, that was the hope of the prior. So we're trying to hear from all commissioners equally. That's sort of our job as staff. You guys are a board, an advisory board who kind of has equal say. And so just making sure that we're in line with all of you as harbor commissioners where you want to point us. But agreed, we can take 1 year, 5 years, 3 years, 8 months. It's easy to say the work is easy, but these sort of things for those that have been through it, it's a lot. I mean, we have to meet a number of times. There is a lot of nuance to policy like this.
Yeah,
So
and I would add, it's fine to make a request or a recommendation, even in the form of a motion, but the level of effort required, I think, needs to be done by the professionals, right? They're managing the staff. So we can't, we're an advisory board. They get paid to manage the level of effort.
Absolutely, but I think our role is to listen to the public and to, make recommendations. And I think that's what we're doing here today, hopefully successfully.
Of course. Go right ahead, please.
In terms of establishing priorities, I completely respect the workload issue and believe that we, the work group, can work with staff on this. This can be.
Good point.
This can be something that we can help and offer time to this. But I'm having a difficult time losing sight of the fact that the Commercial Fisheries Subcommittee was established by the council, who appoints us. And then when we went to the council and we asked them for guidance on what to do next, they responded. And one of the things they said is make commercial fisheries an economic priority. And for those reasons, I don't think that a request to do a policy analysis is that difficult. I know there's no planners on staff, but I am willing to do my best to help Angela to do the work. One of the things that John Doimus said in response to my question about no staff, how's the staff stuff going to do? He looked at me and he said, I expect you to do that. We expect the Harbor Commission to step up and do the heavy lift. And I guess what I'm saying is I am retired and I do have time and I'm willing to make a contribution to get this done because I believe it's what the city council and it's the purpose of the existence of this commission.
Well, I appreciate you offering a solution.
Well, okay.
I really do. And I'm sure the director will take that under advisement. Are there any other comments? Okay, very well. I guess we're ready to vote on the motion.
Okay. Commissioner McCray?
I'm going to have to vote no until staff says it can actually pull it off. I don't want to burden. We have priorities already. I think this is a worthy endeavor, but until there's actually staff time to do this without losing the opportunity on our other priorities. I really believe that we should hear staff say, we can do this now before we do it.
Yeah, Commissioner, don't get, we can do anything, staff. I mean, we are living in policy all the time. And so I think the key word is now. Do this now. There's a lot going on right now. We would be happy to kind of look into this and see what it would take. To be quite honest, this is a relatively new request. And so we had been meeting on a number of things with slip assignment policy. The idea and the ask to create more commercial fishing slips is new to staff. This was kind of 3 weeks ago. And so we need a little bit of time to essentially figure out what that means and what that looks like in our current policy. But including that with sort of our yearly or every couple years sort of policy revisions and having a look at it, I just think there is going to be there's going to be some resistance with some change of this policy. We're opening up a policy that's been in place for a long time and affects a lot of people's livelihoods. And so we want to be very, very cautious messing with those small businesses and how they operate and how they've been serving the waterfront for 10, 20, 30 years. And so we're talking about diving in there and changing those policies. And so that is going to affect people's businesses in the harbor directly. And so I want to give it the due time, but I'm not going to say we can't do it. I can say absolutely we can and we will, just with a little more guidance and research on our end on what that looks like.
Very well. Commissioner Cohen?
Could you read back the?
Could turn on your.
I'm sorry, could you read back the motion? If I said now in it, that wasn't my intent. So I think maybe we just need clarification on what exactly the motion says.
So my understanding was that the motion was to accept the recommendation of Commissioner Nelson in his report.
There is a report with the report that was part of the staff reports, basically asks that a greater allocation of designated commercial slips and improvements to the visiting vessel program, and to recommend approval by the commission that the Waterfront Department consider performing an analysis of the issues raised in the report for further consideration and action by the work group or Harbor Commission.
And
Sure, if you want me to add to it when appropriate or something along
No,
those
and
lines.
commissioners, if I may, it's very specific. It's going at a very specific thing. And so if we had the freedom as staff to sort of review our commercial fishing policy in totality and bring some information back, we could glean a lot more from that. Because even hearing from the commercial fishermen who are here today, it's not just confined to adding more slips and looking at the visitor slip policy. There is a lot to look at. And so even something a little broader gives us the authority to kind of go look at our commercial fishing slip policy in totality. So then we can have more meetings with the work group, bring more information back to you. We're just sort of jumping to a conclusion very quickly on something very, very specific.
Is there, I'm sorry, is it okay is there language that you feel you both are?
I said with a request that the Waterfront Department consider performing an analysis of the issues raised in the report. And if that means they're going to get back to us and tell us what that would take to do that analysis, I think that's within the request.
So it's, the motion is to request that the Waterfront Department consider
Correct.
performing an analysis
Correct.
of issues raised in this report for further consideration and action by the work group and the Harbor Commission.
Correct.
Is that,
Let's do it.
okay.
I would like to change my vote and avoid all the retracting of the motion and all of that and replacing it, and say I would vote for that.
Okay. That's changed. And then Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanowicz,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen,
Yes.
Chair Stedman.
Yes,
That's unanimous.
very well. Very fulsome discussion. So let's move on to the next item, please.
Okay, next item is Commission Work Group and Subcommittee Assignments. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and update as necessary membership on various Harbor Commission work groups and subcommittees per the Board of Harbor Commission rules adopted September 16th, 2010.
Commissioner Nelson?
Just a observation. It looks like I have been removed as chair of the Charter and Business Activity Permits Work Group, if that's the intent. Very well, but I was previously elected chair of that group.
Was this part of the work group, or was this when it was a
This was when
subcommittee?
it was a standing committee, and the motion was made by Betsy Kramer when she was a commissioner.
That's fine. It's probably just a typo. Saying
Right.
a chair and vice chair is not even within staff's, that's not in our purview, so.
Yeah, I don't take it
If
personally.
if that happened, then
My
it's-
name's misspelled, so it's okay.
Wow. You are right, aren't you?
It's okay. I've been called worse.
Please make Michael Nelson chair of the BAP work group.
It's okay.
Yeah, we'll check that and edit it. That's kind of not,
She's doing it right on the fly.
No, Caesar's doing it in the background.
Oh, okay, Caesar's doing
How are
it.
you doing? Okay.
Excellent.
Struggling.
Boy, the new secretary is going to have to learn how to do that stuff, huh? While they're editing, I just wanted to say thanks a lot, Mr. Luna, for your comments. Yeah, appreciate it. You too, Mr. Gutierrez. You pay $16,000 for that boat, for the kelp cutter, for the rent every month? Is that what you said?
Between $1,400 and $1,600 a month.
14 and 1,600, okay.
That's just because we have an end time. They don't charge it by the weight of our boats, charge it by the weight.
Got it.
If it wasn't for that boat, that company would be here. Be somewhere else, more away. The last company that raised that.
Chair again, that nobody online can hear this conversation that's occurring, so. Well, I mean, just trying to keep some decorum.
Are we edited?
You guys are, if you have any,
Can't
you
you
can,
change-
you can have discussion
Yeah,
on,
there's only 2 vacancies.
yeah, so you guys are welcome to have discussion on how you want to fill those spots right now while we get this edited, if you'd like.
That sounds like a good allocation of resources. Let's do it.
Chair, I'm good where I am, perfectly happy with it.
No moves for Commissioner McCray. Commissioner Cohen, boy, you really have to step up here.
I'd love to be on the cruise ship committee.
Hey, we'd love to have you.
All right, let's call it a date.
Okay, there's one change. Are you catching up? Commissioner, right.
Yeah.
She's now cruising with Commissioner Anderson and I.
I'll just bring it up. I've felt that the chair should be on the budget committee. I'm on the budget committee now. I don't know how you feel about that, but one of the conversations that I had recently was that oftentimes chairs will go with staff to present the budget, and I don't know if that's something that you've witnessed as well. And to that respect, I was wondering if we should make that a tradition on the commission. It just was an observation more than anything.
Yeah, that's great.
I would be willing to step down if you wanted that seat. I don't know if you, I also am
Sure.
fine to sit on the budget committee.
Sure, I've
the-
never been a member of the budget work group subcommittee.
Just as a reminder, when we moved to work groups, we did have the discussion about the budget work group. It really serves a purpose only once a year, and so you guys are welcome to recreate that work group. I mean, its work for this budget cycle is essentially done, and so if it just sits around in its existence, it's kind of a subcommittee, and so the idea was to form those work groups when we need them, have a definable end, and then form them again when you need them. And another reminder is that every July or nearest to that, we do select a new vice chair and chair,
Okay.
so.
All right. No, yeah. Well, does anybody want the fishing group? I don't want to hog the committees. I'll take the spot on the fishing
We'd
group.
love
if
to
no
have
one-
you.
Okay, perfect. Then there you go. I've got 2 dates.
You're going to be very busy. We are also expecting a new commissioner, is that right, Director Wiltshire, in July?
Yeah, there were 5 applicants, and so I believe interviews with council begin next week, and then there's 3, usually 2 or 3 sessions with council for interviews, but by July 1, we should have a new harbor commissioner.
Well, at that
Maybe-
time, we can spread around.
Maybe the new
Yeah,
commissioner,
exactly.
can join a couple of work groups,
Okay.
so.
Are we considering disbanding the budget work group until it's time again also in this?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, with a new harbor commissioner coming, you'll inevitably be back in the spot very, very soon. I think in the spirit of work groups, it's when that task is done, you can disband them to keep it cleaner, and so we're not stacking up all of these work groups, so that would be staff's recommendation.
Would we have to make a motion to recreate the work group, though, come January, or schedule a budget work group meeting next year in 2024?
When we have a new harbor commissioner in July, or anytime between July and next January, we will have this exact item will show up with the ability to kind of create and assign people to work groups, and so at that time, you could create it again.
Okay, great.
Or we could get into a habit at when we do maybe at our mid-year or one of the fall meetings, we could have an item on there to create the budget work group as
Okay.
well, so.
I guess my
Make
concern
sure
is that,
make sure there's a chance to do that prior to before it's need.
okay. Would there ever be a case where a budget work group wouldn't be needed, though? I mean, I feel like it's kind of going to be known that we'll meet definitely next spring, right?
Yeah, that's really up to the harbor commission. Other boards and commissions don't necessarily have that. They rely on the commission to do that. That's kind of been a tradition of the harbor commission to have a budget work group, so, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. I mean, I'd be in favor of leaving it, just so we know
Yeah.
we have it in place for next year, that we're definitely going to be meeting
I
with the
agree.
waterfront.
Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Oh,
Was it a vote?
was there a
Is it a vote?
motion?
I think so.
No.
We did like a verbal motion and a second to essentially
Just a
accept
verbal?
it. Well, there needs to be a motion and a second.
I'd make a motion to approve the changes listed on the screen.
Second.
Okay, now we're ready for a vote.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Stanowik,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen,
Yes.
Commissioner McCray,
Aye.
Chair Stedman.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
All righty, moving right along here to item number 5. So we kind of discussed it already.
Item number 5, discussion about various ways for harbor commissioners to stay informed on the city efforts that may impact the waterfront. Recommendation that Harbor Commission discuss ways to stay informed about citywide issues that may impact the waterfront, discuss and take action as necessary.
So,
This might Is this
Yeah,
mine?
just,
Did you
yeah,
wanna-
we have, there's no PowerPoint presentation accompanying
Right.
us, so it was just a chance for the commission to talk about the topic at hand.
This is just, I've been trying to have a conversation with all of you, and the only place that we can have a conversation at this point, because of the Brown Act, is here, just to discuss, we don't have liaisons, but we do have a lot of business that touches other commissions. And I know that there are some of us that do attend other commission meetings. I know Commissioner Nelson does, for example. I do myself. And I'm trying to just, while we're all together, understand if there's interest in certain people going to other commissions or if they are already attending so that I know. For example, I went to the State Street Master Plan State Committee meeting this month, and also there was an issue with the sign committee this month. The Anchor Rose had a request to put actually 4 signs on the Maritime Museum building, and they were approved to put 3 signs on there. I'm trying to think what else I attended, but at any rate, there's kind of 2 reasons I think that it's good to attend those meetings, or that I do think is good. One is that you start to understand how other commissions work, and you start to understand the process. And I think that for me, that's really been helpful. For instance, at the State Street Master Plan meeting, they had a really wonderful dialogue with a bunch of different constituents, and I was thinking, wow, we should have had this when we were looking at maybe like the parking lot remodel, like it's going to impact a lot of different people. So that's one benefit for commissioners. But the other benefit is really that you get to meet and understand the needs of some of the other people that are working within the harbor. For example, Anchor Rose, when I saw that, one of the things that he spoke about was that people have a hard time finding their restaurant, and that's why they were requesting 4 different signs to be placed so that from each parking lot, no matter where someone parked, they would be able to see their building. And so it just gave me a lot of understanding for some of the issues that they were having, plus I got to meet him. So for those reasons, I hope that we all, find a place that we can do that and where there's not overlap. The places that I would like us to, make sure that we have someone that is attending would be, for example, City Council. I think that it would be great that if we had a commissioner, when we have a presentation that's going to City Council, that at least one commissioner go and just understand what their questions were, as well as of course, Director Welshire should, be the point person there. But I think it's really nice to have a commissioner there, and I think that a lot of commissions do that when they're going to go in front of City Council. The other commissions that, that have a lot of overlap are Planning Commission, and it sounds like Moby Dick has already through their Planning Commission process. Is that my understanding? No, they're going to be going into it. So we have Moby Dick on Stearns Wharf that is going to be having a major project, and then we also, I believe, had the Sea Landing that is going to be having a major project. Both of those are going to go to the Planning Commission, and I assume that they probably will also go to Historic Landmarks Commission as well. So those are areas, no, they're not going to go to either?
No, the buildings on Stearns Wharf are not in HLC's district.
Oh, they are not?
I don't know.
Very interesting. Okay, I did not know that. Learned something new. So the other one was Parks and Rec. There have been a lot of, parking, obviously, the signage committee, which I didn't even realize. And then when I went to the State Street Advisory, I didn't go to the advisory meeting, I want to clarify. I went to the State Street Master Plan Create State meeting, which is giving information to the State Street Advisory. They were, first of all, really happy to have someone from the Harbor Commission there, from the waterfront. But they also let me know that there is a plan for the State Street project to connect at some point with the bike path and the pedestrian areas down in front of the waterfront. And I don't even know if that is under our purview or not. Do you know that?
I think no, if
No,
it's on the
okay.
public right-of-way, that is not within waterfront's
That's not
purview.
within our waterfront. Okay, so that's good to know. But at any rate, and then the other piece of the puzzle would be that the airport right now is doing a master plan, and I think that there's maybe a need for us at some point to consider doing a new master plan for the Harbor Commission, and it would be interesting to watch how they conduct their process so that we know, how their process is being run. So I'm not looking for a motion, I'm just looking for a conversation. If there's anyone that is interested in attending any of these, then it prevents overlap. And if there's not, I understand, our time is all precious.
I'm happy to jump in a little bit. I do already attend the State Street Working Group meetings, which is also on the third Thursday
Yes.
of the month at 2.
Okay.
I haven't been to the last 2, but I normally do go. But I think one thing that was talked about in the beginning of the year, forget if it was our think tank meeting or when it was, but I would love to be on the agenda, like a bullet point that things that come across your desk during the month that was been since we last met that seems pertinent to the to the harbor, to what we're supposed to do here, almost like a little summary or synopsis, or saying like, these are some of the things that I've seen the city is focusing on. And I could probably forward you like kind of an example of what I would be thinking. Would be something that I would love to get definitely a more holistic view of what the city is doing. So I'm happy, for example, next meeting we have, I'm happy to report on anything that I've learned at the State Street.
At the State Street.
meeting.
Is that something that's, I mean, is it maybe I'll let the two of you speak, but I was going to say like a list of agenda items from other commissions. Do you have something like that you already know about or put together?
Commissioner Cohen, Anderson, yes, we can do that. All that information is readily available on all of the board and commission's websites. And so there's been a concerted effort with the city not to sort of overlap. And then all of a sudden we're spending huge amounts of time at different boards and commissions just updating on what others are doing. And we did bring that up at the priority setting workshop. My preference would be for harbor commissioners who are interested to access that data in all of the ways that it's available. Us as staff trying to predict exactly what you guys think is a priority and what you want to see on there becomes really, really difficult. And so the city tries to do the best job it can to have all that information at your fingertips. It's
And
on
is
the
that
website.
just the agenda, or is it more than the agenda? Because I do jump on the agenda.
If
but it
you,
doesn't-
you can sign up for any boards and commissions to be automatically emailed anytime any document is uploaded to that. So that would be agendas, meeting minutes, PowerPoints, relevant documents. And so that exists. You can sign up for that for any city board and commission, city news and brief, our newsletter, and city news blogs. So like daily city news updates. You could take all of that into your inbox if you wanted. And so it becomes tough for us to parse out exactly what you'd be after. We'd inevitably sort of miss something, or we could spend a lot of time sort of updating what other boards and commissions are doing.
Do they, for example, Anchor Rose, do they communicate with you, the sign committee, that they have a project that is within the harbor?
I mean, typically, all of this happens in a very linear process, and so projects don't end up in front of boards and commissions just on a whim. They end up because they're required to by either the building and safety or planning. And so the Anchor Rose renovation, us, Waterfront, as the landlord, we have sort of first right of review of those plans, and so we review them conceptually. And then we rely on the expertise of those other boards and commissions. Building and safety, the permit. We most recently took the diving statue to the Arts Advisory Committee, which was kind of new. We don't usually do that. They weigh in on the artistic elements, things that Harbor Commission can weigh in on, but doesn't necessarily. And so it happens in series. We saw the Anchor Rose renovation project 4 or 6 months ago. We talked about it conceptually, what that looks like, and then we send it on its way through all of those other boards and commissions who weigh in within their purview.
Would it be, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, would it be too much to ask that when you know that one of those projects is going before a commission, that you just let us know so that we are aware if we did want to sit and just be a member of the public there?
By email or by, because it becomes difficult with the staging and the timing. I mean, if we're doing updates, backward-looking updates, yeah, I really want to, and I urge the members of the public to get that information on their own too, because eventually if we set up these systems where we're sort of providing this service, it inevitably becomes tough to continue that.
Okay.
And to get
I
you
hear
that-
you.
yeah.
So I understand, and we don't want to put more work on the staff. We're very mindful of that. So I'm just asking then, I guess I'll go back to the commissioners, if there's anyone who would want to look at agendas so that if there are items, maybe, I don't know, that we are at least aware of them.
Well, yes. In fact, I have signed up, as Mike suggests, and I get the agendas for the Architectural Review Board, the Historic Landmarks Commission, and it's everything you could possibly want in terms of whether or not you would want to attend. For example, on the Planning Commission, I know where the local coastal plan said ocean-dependent, coastal-dependent activity ought to take place. So the reason, and that's supposed to be for commercial fishing. And so I'm very keen to see if there's a conditional use permit being recommended for that zone, that designated zone. And so if it was, then I would go. So that's sort of the way I did it. I was looking at the State Street Advisory Committee, but again, if one of us is going, then what I should do is communicate with Seth. And I don't know if we can do that ourselves or whatever, like, to find out who's Zooming who's on what board, because I would love to know. I mean, for example, the general plan says there should be an integration of State Street and the waterfront. And I think that the $800,000 plan that's being done for State Street, I think it divides State Street into sections, but I don't think it has any reference or consideration of what's happening right across the street on Stearns Wharf. So that would be a question that I would ask. How can the general plan say that this kind of integration or coordination should take place, yet you've got a master plan that stops at Cabrillo Boulevard? So I would ask you to ask that question, Seth, if you're going.
Yeah.
And if I'm watching the Planning Commission, which I am more carefully than anything else,
Okay.
I would be willing to do that. And but I don't know if I'm allowed to send. Am I allowed to send out notices to people that at the Planning Commission meeting there was a discussion of such and such, or is that serial communication?
Yes, that's serial
Yes,
communication
it
of the
is.
Brown Act,
It'd have to be
absolutely.
discussed
We
here,
have an
right?
item
So, like-
standing on our agenda, so when we meet monthly, there's commission and staff communications. Is a very great time for people to either reverse look at what they have
Thank you.
attended or forward look
Right,
at what
right.
is coming the next month. So none of this happens so quickly that, most of these meetings are on a monthly cycle too. So with a little bit of thought, a little bit of planning, this would be a great item for you all to say, hey, I attended this meeting last month and this is what came up, or hey, these meetings are coming next month.
Yeah,
Go for it.
that's what I think we're trying to do, is just understand so that there's not overlap. So if you're going to the State Street Advisory meeting, you can do that, and you're going to the planning.
Right.
And then I was going to start looking at the Parks and Rec, and the signage just happened to show up. But I think that those are, good.
Maybe we need something similar to what we have for the working groups. If we have a handful of.
We can't call ourselves anything, so
No,
this
wouldn't
is
be,
where I get into trouble.
for the slides that we have all our names next to the cruise ships and
Yeah.
the budget committees and all that, can we not have a slide that has this?
Who's
7
going to be attending
Obviously not
what?
yeah.
I think that we should be able to, but I would like you to have that conversation.
This is the second time at it. I'm not going to play heavy defense right now, but our city attorney was super clear. And so you guys can essentially do what you want, but I will take it to the attorney, and we may have to unwind it next week. So the reality is that you all are able to attend any other boards and commissions meetings that you want. You cannot set up a conditional liaison or a person that is structurally defined to go there. And I think the big catch is that you can attend those meetings as a member of the public. You do not have actionable item there. You can't bring things to them. You can't be a part of that meeting of the decision-making body. And so I think we were pretty clear on that last go-around, so I'm just going to stand with that.
So we can attend as
A member of the
members
public.
of the public.
You can attend
and we
any
can
meeting you
talk
want.
about it here.
You can give public comment at any other meeting, you can
Yeah.
give public comment at a city council meeting, but you don't have purview over what those boards and commissions are reviewing. So you don't necessarily, you can't participate in those meetings as an acting member
Yeah,
or offer anything more than somebody from the public.
Yeah. I don't think, that's not what I'm trying to say that we're doing. I was just trying to divide the workload in an organized manner, but that's not, they don't like it.
I mean,
No, and I think just combining whatever thing has been said, I think we try what we had kind of said. Everybody kind of expressed interest in another commission. Director Wilshire pointed out the commission and staff communications is on here. I think, next month, if you want to attend meetings, this is the perfect time that we all kind of congregate and say what we have learned from the other commission meetings, and then we can make adjustments from there, right? I mean, we can try it out and see how we kind of communicate that. But yeah, I mean, I have kids who use parks, and I read through the minutes for the Parks and Recreation usually every month, and so if I see something, I'm happy to report it during that commission and staff communications part.
Well, if you're already looking at parks, then I'll put you down for parks on my non-existent list. Okay.
Commissioner Nelson?
And I also am aware that the State Street Commission, for example, met with the Historic Landmarks Commission. They met with the Planning Commission, and they had an exchange about each other's purview. And I can see those sorts of things happening, particularly with parks.
Yeah.
I mean, right next door to parks. I mean, to me, we're supposed to be the waterfront, but are we really? No, we're just Stearns Wharf, the parking lots, and the harbor. But if you're going to do a master plan, for example, we were talking about master plans, well, the master plan ought to be for the waterfront, and it should include that. And so therefore, Parks and Recreation ought to be part of that planning discussion. So if we decide to make a priority, which was one of mine, to do a master plan, then I think we should meet
Absolutely.
with Parks and Rec Commission.
Right.
So.
That's all that I have. Thank you. I just wanted to have that conversation. It sounds like there's several of us that are already attending and doing this work, and it's just good for us to have a place where we can all talk about it. And
It is.
This is the only place, so.
Yeah, and again, I would emphasize what Vice Chair Stanwyck already mentioned, that commission and staff communications item there's no structure to that. So if you want to update the entire commission and the public, that's a good spot for it right there. Is there any kind of motion?
I don't think we're supposed to have a motion, so I just wanted to have a conversation, and that's all. I've never wanted to have a motion on this. I just wanted to have a conversation. So,
All right.
thank you.
Very well. Let's move on to the department updates.
all right. Putting these at the end was the best decision ever. I'll be brief today, so quick department update. I did want to update the group, next slide. I did want to update the commission on our recent FY24-25 budget process, so you all were an integrated part in that. good to go? Yeah, good to go? Okay. Okay. Do we need more time, or? No, all good? Yeah, just wanted to update on what we've been doing with our 24-25 budget. So, as you all know, we went through the motions of our budget. This is on the screen right now is where we've been to date. And so our budget cycle is July 1 through June 30th. So it's a long road. As of now, we've reviewed the budget internally, presented it to our city administrator, presented it to the budget work group, Harbor Commission on April 20th, and most recently we took our budget to City Council and the Finance Committee on May 5th and 9th respectively. The only portions left for adopting the budget are budget deliberations on June 7th and then ultimate adoption on June 13th. Next slide. So just in the spirit of sharing what happened at council, semi on topic. So I wanted to provide a little bit of feedback. Overall, the meeting with council went well. We presented very much similar to what we presented to the Harbor Commission. Some of the main comments and concerns and questions are up on the screen right now. I'll go through them really briefly. A couple council members noticed that the waterfront is essentially budgeting a deficit, so our overall expenditures predicted for FY24 are higher than our revenues when you include our capital projects. There's also some discussion about increasing our reserve target. So the Harbor Preservation Fund is it's tied to a fixed dollar amount between $2 and $5 million. It's been that way for over a decade. And so anytime you tie something to a fixed dollar amount, it eventually gets outdated. The proposed solution for that down the road is we're going to review our reserve policy with finance and hopefully tie our capital reserve to a forward-looking 3 years of our capital, because that's really what it's intended to do, is our reserves are intended to fund capital. So if we can tie it to something that's a little more relevant and appropriate than just an arbitrary $2 to $5 million amount. So look for that in the future. Some fairly robust comments on the annual parking permit price being the best deal in town. They were, in so many words, saying that the price is essentially too low. Some other comments on evaluating our monthly slip fees and how they compare to other harbors. There was a general feeling from a couple council members that those could be low and there's some room to move on those. And then a lot of comments on the fact that they're hopeful that our FEMA reimbursements, so it was good they're aware that that was a big hit to our reserves, and council's very hopeful that we can kind of replenish that with FEMA reimbursements. Some specific questions that came up were what drove the increase in the financial management line item. So it's a pretty small line item. It was about $200,000 of revenue. The increase is purely due to interest rates on our reserves and holdings. And as you know, interest rates have gone up over the last year or two, and so the money that we see back from that went up. There were a couple questions on what the overall revenue to the department is with respect to cruise ships, and how could the waterfront make that up if it were to go away. A question from a council member on what is the waterfront doing to maintain and repair the ice house. We gave a fairly brief synopsis of the money that we put in there maintenance-wise, and then the $600,000 that we kind of were reinvesting into major systems into the ice house. There was a question that is waterfront setting aside more direct funding for commercial fishing in this budget? The answer was no. Commercial CFSB is still utilizing the $25,000 from 2 years ago and $50,000 last year, and there was no ask or plan to fund additional funds this budget cycle. A question of what drove our large revenue increase from 21 to 22. The answer there was really just a really robust return from COVID, about the best scenario that could have happened. So we rebounded pretty strongly, almost unsustainably so, and so there was a big spike in revenue in 21 and 22. Parking and tenants and everything boating related just went through the roof. Question about sea level rise. Is the plan for the waterfront revenues to kind of pay for the impacts of sea level rise? The answer there is no, not directly. I mean, that's a huge problem that we're much smaller department and not capable of kind of funding the magnitude of that problem. But we'll continue to kind of keep an eye on it as the front line and look for outside funding sources. We've been really successful in bringing grant funds in. And but yeah, no, we don't have the scope and scale to fund that. House property insurance divvied up between various city departments, so council's very aware of our enormous property insurance increases, and so the way property insurance is divvied up between city departments is the city keeps a property schedule, and so we're essentially on the hook for all the properties that are allotted to the waterfront, and that goes for all the other departments as well. And then looking for feedback and report on commercial fishing efforts to secure a location for storage. So we provided them a really brief update that CFSB's continues to work with Santa Barbara City College on a parcel or some space there, and so they were expressed interest in that. Next question, next slide. What's next? Fully anticipate the council will accept our waterfront budget as kind of recommended by Harbor Commission and themselves. Budget and fees take effect July 1st of this coming year. And then just to recap some of the changes that we made through the process. So we reduced our maximum daily rate for boat trailers from $12 a day to $6 a day based on recommendations by the Harbor Commission. We reduced the maximum non-surrender ticket for boat trailers from 72 to 24. We increased the vessel impound fee from 100 to 250, and that was Harbor Commission. And then we increased the proposed annual parking permit fee from, we originally proposed going from 125 to 130, and after council, we're proposing going from 125 to 135 for the annual parking permit fee. Next slide. Oh, I'll stop there. Any questions on how council went and budget went and all that? I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware that we went to council on May 5th and presented what we presented to you all.
I just want to thank you for all your efforts and the additional analysis that we asked for. Thank you very much. Great job.
Yeah, thanks for breaking it down. Commissioner Cohen?
I just had a question on the budget. When I was looking through it, I noticed that, and maybe it changed from when I saw it last, but I noticed that on the FEMA reimbursement that you had 2.5 million, and my understanding was that the request in at this point, or last I heard, was at 3.5. That's a pretty big difference and would make a huge difference in what the budget looks like. Am I reading that wrong, or?
Yeah, so Commissioner Cohen, our hard expenses are around $2 million. We anticipate the cost of permitting and future expenses of constructing that retention wall will be high. And so we've got kind of a year or two long tail. So quite frankly, we're trying to encapsulate all of the costs that we're going to be borne now and into the future and getting that to FEMA. So some of that has been a direct hit to our budget, dollars we've actually spent. Some of that is anticipated future dollars, so it hasn't hit our budget yet, but hopefully we can bring as much as we possibly can back from FEMA, knowing that we're going to have a lot of expense in the future.
Thank you.
Couple staffing changes. So congratulations to Angela. She has been promoted to Chris Bell's previous role of Waterfront Administrative Analyst. So we conducted a pretty robust recruitment and a lot of qualified candidates. So kudos to Angela for everything she brings to the department. Her effective date in her new role was May 6th. As you can see, she's still doing both roles. So kudos.
Good job, Angela.
Thank you.
Next slide. And one other hire, so new we don't have a photo yet, but waterfront office specialist. So he works in the parking office. This was previously held by Susie Dunselman. Position's been vacant for a few months. Again, 5 qualified candidates, and we recently hired Trenton Smith. He was formerly with Parks and Rec Department and effectively started on April 24th. So congrats to Trenton, and does a huge amount in there, just a huge amount of cash transactions and accounting, kind of keeping the parking business side of the parking operation going. So welcome, Trenton. And I think that was it for me. Next slide. Yeah, that was it for me. I'll pass it over to Cesar Barrios for a quick update on Moby Dick's restaurant renovation.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Mr. Wilshire mentioned I have a brief presentation on the Moby Dick remodel, and let me jump right into it. So as many of you know, the iconic Moby Dick restaurant, which is located at 220 Stearns Wharf, opened its doors in the early 1980s. Since then, the restaurant has offered a variety of menu options along with one of the best views in town. The owners have been in discussions with the waterfront department regarding their plans to remodel part of the interior space, which will include a new oyster and cocktail bar, as well as new light fixtures and windows. The construction is expected to begin in late June, early July. And here you have a floor plan of showing in more detail the remodel section. And see if you can see my cursor here. So this section right here, that's the north side of the building. That being the roadway and the main entrance. They're going to remodel this section, turn that into an oyster cocktail bar, adding new light fixtures, new booths, and giving it a fresh look. And I don't recall exactly when the last renovation took place, but the owners are very excited to open this space to the public. And here you have some photos of the restaurant facade, the entrance, and some of the amazing views from the interior. And I will keep you updated on the project, and we look forward to seeing it completed, hopefully by this summer. It should take 2 to 3 months to get the whole project completed. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Commissioner McCray?
Yeah, I was just curious, why June? Why not delay it until a slower time in the year?
Commissioner McCray, that's a very good question. I believe they just want to get this project done. I know that just from my experience seeing a lot of these business owners, they start this process fall, winter time, and they're hoping to get their permitting and everything in line to have everything ready to go by summer. And through our permitting process, it could take months to get a construction permit. I mean, they're already in this. They still have to have some plans reviewed, and but I believe they want to get this done as soon as possible, hopefully before the peak of summer.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen?
I just want to say, so just to clarify, they're not going to actually start construction. They're just going to start seeking their permits in June. And is that right?
I believe they already started with the permitting process. Waterfront Department has reviewed their plans, and facilities manager, Mr. Brian Adair, has provided input to the restaurant, and the next phase will be to go to planning. So that it could take a little longer. But from what they expressed to us, they said June, July. Again, going back to your point with the anchor rows, with the signage, I brought that item to the commission back late last year, and you just saw how their permitting process moved with the signage.
Oh, I'm very familiar with that. I've been trying to get a permit for about 2 years now. I was going to say, I just had the same type of question, which is that if they do the construction in the summer, does that impact what the waterfront gets? Because obviously you get a percentage of their lease, so we would want to try to make that line up for their slower time. Although I don't know, maybe their summer is their slower time.
We were concerned about it too, and we talked with the saving grace is the small portion of the restaurant, and it's just seating right now, so they're planning on staying open through essentially the whole renovation, and so that's kind of the silver lining, if they get to it by summer.
Yeah, and then on that too would be that if they're doing construction or they have construction vehicles out there during the summer, does that impact other tenants? Are other people going to get upset that they're taking up parking spaces or, so?
That is correct. And Commissioner Cohen, generally when that happens, we encourage any non-essential vehicles to park off the wharf. Generally when we have construction projects, and some of them do happen in the summer, it could be either a city project or a tenant project. We try to minimize the effects and impacts to the public.
We'll move on to item number 8.
Yeah, Mr. Engebretson, long awaited.
Good evening, Chair Stedman, Commissioners. For the folks at home that don't know me, my name's Eric Ingebretson. I'm the Harbor Operations Manager. And we'll get started with a real brief operations report. Well, it's come time to move forward with replacing our old Harbor Patrol Boat number 3. It was built in 1999 by Norsco Marine out of Bellingham, Washington. It's almost 25 years old now, and it's served a useful life in public safety, but it's time for this vessel to be retired. The new boat that we are purchasing through Norsco Marine is a 35-foot catamaran. Again, it was built by Norsco Marine, which is recognized as one of the premier fire and rescue and law enforcement boats. They've got over 20 years experience building emergency response vessels, and they're currently local, state, and federal government are purchasing this type of vessel. It's equipped with 300 horsepower, twin 300 horsepower engines. It's capable of pumping 1,500 gallons per minute during fire suppression. It has a range of approximately 300 nautical miles, cruise speed of 35 knots, and the top end of 55. The electronic package that this boat will come with surpasses industry standards, and it also has a dewatering capability of 250 gallons per minute. Currently, some of the agencies, currently using Moose boats include San Francisco Fire Department, San Francisco Police Department, Long Beach Fire Department, Long Beach PD, Tiburon, Santa Cruz Harbor, California Fish and Wildlife, just to name a few. And of course, the U.S. Navy and the United States Coast Guard are using these vessels as well. The vessel will take about a year to construct, and that will come at a purchase price of $850,000. We've been budgeting for this boat for approximately 9 years, and I'm happy to see that we're finally on the road to moving forward. And just a real quick harbor blotter. On April 29th, I don't know if some of you heard this story or not, but officers received multiple reports of power outages throughout all of the marinas. It was determined later that we had an individual enter the marinas between 2:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning, and they unplugged over 100 shore power cords throughout the marinas. We do have a possible suspect on video, and that video has been sent to the Santa Barbara Police Department. And again, if you see anybody inside the marinas that doesn't belong, feel free to contact the Harbor Patrol. Sometimes folks try to call and they're out on patrol, but you can always reach them on VHF 12 or 16, and you can also use 911. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Cohen?
You must be getting some of my requests from earlier because it's not on request, so I don't know if they're like all coming in now. I was just going to say, though, that I noticed on the budget that this was budgeted at $90,000 for this year and 100, or that replacing boats. I forget the exact terminology on the budget, and then 150. Is that for next or for 2025? Is that for a different boat then, or is that I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, Commissioner Cohen, good question. We have a vessel replacement fund, so we essentially put some money away every year.
Oh, perfect.
So we've been feeding that, as Mr. Engelbert said, for about 10 years, and so we put $100,000, knowing that these boats are going to have to get replaced. So we'll build that up, and then as boat 2 and boat 3 need to be replaced, we'll kind of do the same thing. So it's really just setting money aside.
Commissioner Nelson?
Do you sell the old boat? What do you do with the old boat, the old patrol boat?
That was my question, too.
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Nelson, yeah, that boat will, when it's decommissioned, it probably will go up for auction.
Do you get the, since you're an enterprise fund, do you get the proceeds of the sale, or does the city try to grab that money from you?
Those funds go back into the general fund.
Fantastic.
Yes. And if I can add, just on this aging boat, both Greg Lowe and Mark Stouter have done an incredible job keeping this old boat up and running for us, and we really appreciate their efforts.
Good job, Mark. All right. I don't see any other. Commissioner Nelson. Well, it just rotates from Commissioner Cohen to Commissioner Nelson, in case you haven't noticed. So it's on automatic.
I don't have anything.
All right. So we're going to move on to Commission and Staff Communications. Director Wiltshire?
No, nothing from staff. We've communicated sufficiently tonight.
Commissioner Cohen?
I did not hit the button.
I did. Tonight, we learned that the difficulty associated with doing an analysis of the additional slips was frustrated by our harbor priority setting exercise. And so when I heard Commissioner Cohen mention the airport doing their very elaborate plan, so that makes me want to know, should we request the airport to come make a presentation to us about their master planning process, or if you're going to surprise us and start to bring in the priorities? I'm not aware of any appearance on agendas of priorities we set when we did the video game. So when will we see the priorities that we selected? When does that move in? Because if you're using those as a way of saying, we can't get to this or we can't get to that, so when are we going to get to the priorities that we weighted with our computer game? So.
Oh, Commissioner Nelson, right away we did, and so that informed the third-party presentations that we had in and the meetings all after that, and so we tried to set our kind of 12-month look ahead based on those priorities.
So, okay, I'm just curious, is there an example of when that was presented to us? I guess I missed something.
Yeah, at a past meeting after the priority setting workshop, we presented a kind of a 12-month look ahead that had we had parsed out the kind of the priority topics from that to kind of help guide the agendas going forward. So knowing that nothing's set in stone and obviously things change, but we were trying the best to sort of prepare for who to get on there and who to have in.
So when will you have it with you? Yeah. So when will the harbor, when will the issue of master planning appear? Just out of curiosity.
The items that I had from the handout that were given back then were regular department updates, I don't know, I should read this, lease activity, budget updates, and third-party educational presentations. I'm not sure if those were the items that we said that we wanted to see, or if they were items that we wanted to have. At any rate, I have it here. I can send you a copy of it.
No, it's okay.
No, we made some pretty immediate changes to how we view leases, when we review budgets, when staff presents our department updates, and so those were kind of instantaneous. And then the larger topics were, I believe, lease activity is what we wanted to dig into. And there hasn't been a lot of time between now and then, so again, we only have 4 or 5 meetings, and so we're trying to pick what those coming meetings are going to have. But that priority workshop did inform, at least on our end, on staff end, we kind of changed the way we are doing these agendas and when and what you guys see. So I thought it was productive.
That might be something, for June, since, I'm sorry but that we have a check-in on those priorities because we'll be at the half-year point.
Oh, yeah, I just want to say, yeah, I remember, I think during the March director's report, you guys, the waterfront put up a 12-month slide of potential items. So, yeah, I know I've gone back and checked that out, but I believe it was during the March meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I only have 5 more months, so just trying to figure out when we're going to get to the priorities in 2023.
Any other comments or communications or hands raised?
I haven't received any additional speaker slips, and there's nobody online with their hand raised at the moment.
Commissioner Anderson? Huh? No, it doesn't. Yeah. No. No, not at all. It's the little screen that Adam manipulates, so. Well, if there are no other communications, we'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.